Hello and welcome to A-Team Group's TradingTech Summit Virtual 2021. We would like to thank our platinum sponsor Luxoft and our gold sponsors Glue42, Options, BSO, CJC and IPC. Also our media partners Financial IT, FinTech Finance and International Business Magazine. If you'd like to connect with your peers, you can do so on the networking page, and if you have questions for our speakers, please use the panel to the right of the video. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the summit.
Hello everybody, and welcome to TradingTech Summit 2021, brought to you by A-Team Group in virtual format this year. My name is Andrew Delaney. I am President and Chief Content Officer of A-Team Group. And I welcome you to today's event. We're going to be looking today at the post-pandemic trading technology landscape. We'll be exploring some of the challenges you are facing in the new trading environment that it's presented us with. And we'll also be looking at the opportunities for leveraging technology as a differentiator in this environment, as a way of helping you innovate and to stay one step ahead of the competition. As usual, we're doing this with the help of a great group of trading technology experts from across the industry, and I'd personally like to thank them all for sharing their expertise and insight today. Great to have everybody aboard, and of course great to see some old friends. Haven't seen a lot of you for the past year, and of course, like everybody else, I'm looking forward to us all getting together in the same room at some point. But anyway, let's get on with this great event that we have lined up for you. A few housekeeping points before we get going with the program. As you know, we are dependent on our sponsors for making this event possible. So please do visit the networking and sponsor section on the platform. This will allow you to connect with sponsors and find out how they can help you achieve your goals. You'll also, from that area, see who is attending, and you can network with peers and colleagues, again, through the platform. A couple of upcoming things from A-Team. We will have a new trading regulations handbook ready soon. We're also launching a new ESG handbook. Both will be available for download from the A-Team Insight website. Throughout this virtual conference, we encourage you to get involved by voting in audience polls. You'll be asked questions by several presenters coming up, and you can answer those poll questions using the Slido facility, which should be to the right of the screen you're watching currently. You can also use Slido to ask questions to presenters. So please do make full use of that. We've got some great experts available today, so go ahead and ask them some questions. Okay, that's enough from me. Before we get on with the program, we're going to listen to a message from our platinum sponsor, DXC Luxoft.
Luxoft helps integrate businesses with advanced technologies that deliver an unparalleled experience. Using our blockchain expertise, we help to remove data silos and improve trust. We are taking full advantage of the growing symbiosis between human and AI talents. With self-learning machines and robots on our side, we will be able to shape the world of tomorrow. With our client-centric approach, Luxoft quickly connects the dots to identify a perfect solution, from development to delivery. We offer technology hope, we embrace customer fear, and we drive the experience of tomorrow. And because we live and breathe technology, we see what others have missed.
There we go. Sorry, I was on mute there. So thanks to Luxoft for that. Let's get on with the program. We're going to kick off with a Keynote Fireside chat. The topic is Trading Technology Outlook, Leveraging Disruption to Drive Innovation. And our expert today is Irina Sonic-Bright, Managing Director for Investment Banking at Credit Suisse. Welcome, Irina. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well.
Hello, Andrew, and hello, everyone. Good to see you. Unfortunately, not everyone, but hopefully one day again. I remember when you had these sessions of a podium and you can see people in the podium, so it was so nice. It's a bit of a nostalgic thought. Where are you guys? But anyway, we're here talking to you.
And we'll be back soon doing that, I'm sure, Irina, and we appreciate you coming today and helping us out. The premise for this session is that the past year has seen the need to respond to a shift to large-scale remote working. We've had that partnered with extreme trading volatility, put huge pressure on trading systems and infrastructures. And we want to really talk about some of the changes and innovation opportunities that this disruptive environment has created. We're going to look into where things like cloud technology and other technologies and innovations can help the future of financial services. Irina is going to help us. So Irina, before we start, please give us a bit of background. Tell us a little bit about your role at Credit Suisse, a bit about your background.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. So I'm Irina Sonic-Bright, and I look after product management and market structure for Credit Suisse Global Execution Services. I've been with Credit Suisse for just over 20 years. I originally started in technology. I used to write exchange links for those of you who are in this business. But generally, it's just interesting. This video from Luxoft we just watched. The reason I actually went to technology and my first degree was robotics. It's actually this. This was a pictures of a future which I've seen 30 years ago when I went into this industry. And I'm glad it's happening now. Well, sort of getting there.
I was actually a little distracted by the ad, in fact, to see the robot there. I hadn't seen that before, and it was quite, I was like, whoa, that's quite interesting. So there you go, full circle. And normally you're based in Canary Wharf in London, is that correct?
I am in London. I have sort of a global remit, so I do travel a bit, but it's primarily based in London.
Very good. So we're going to cover quite a lot of ground. We've got quite a short period of time, so I won't blather too much and let Irina do most of the talking. That's why I like it. Irina, let's start by reviewing the last year from a trading technology perspective. Huge pressures on trading infrastructures, trading systems. What are some of the technology trends that you have seen?
I will start with a joke. The biggest technology trend for me was to find mute and unmute button. So I think we worked it out. You too, Andrew. Yeah, we worked it out. It's good. But to talk seriously, I think the biggest thing, when I start thinking about what happened during the past year, I think what we need to start focus on or keep focusing on is what exactly we can learn from the crisis. So we had this excellent opportunity to see what works and what doesn't work, and it's technology related and both human related and human attitude towards condition as well. So both humans and tech went through this stressed environment. So what we found out that we have very good disaster resiliency capability. Personally, I don't think we would have been there 10 years ago. I think the past 10 years of technological innovation, and also to some extent, I think I mentioned part of my role is the market structure. So I have to deal with a lot of regulation, and we just undergo very big regulatory change in Europe, which is MiFID II. Quite a lot of emphasis during this regulation was exactly on that, on stability of financial environment. So to some extent, it helped us. So in practical context, we didn't have much issues when COVID happened. So we have seen majority of our operation model can work remotely. And I'm not only talking about humans, I'm talking about our connectivity systems and everything. So probably some slight changes was, and something slight unusual is when traders had to go and start working from home. So over there, it's probably extra emphasis right now on how can we make desk tools more thinner maybe, so this experience of working from home can be better. They probably were set up various control functions as well to allow traders to conduct the activity at home. But from heavy infrastructure environment, we definitely proved very well that we can work remotely.
So on just casting your mind back to those first few weeks of the pandemic, I mean, was it sort of like action stations, or was it quite a smooth, calm transition to work from home / hybrid environment?
I think just initially it was a gentle transition, to be honest. It's not like because I work on a trading desk. So basically I support a business which is both electronic trading and high touch trading. So for electronic trading world, it was very easy for us because all technology is already somewhere in the data centers, resilient data centers. You manage it remotely anyway. Quite a lot of our IT resources are quite distributed as well across the globe, that it helped a lot. So it helped a lot that all of us were in the same situation. So when you call people in Hong Kong, or you call people in Tokyo, or call people in Mumbai, they all understand what's going on. So the only thing you had to manage probably operationally, which country goes through the which sort of like peak at the moment and how they are affected. But technology was already allowing this. So I think the biggest impact of working from home I've seen around voice trading, especially during a time where buy-side traders are trying to establish their working from home environment. They had more sort of they basically had more reliance on high-touch traders on the sell side, because they wanted somebody to look after their trades while they establishing their work trading condition. So we had a bit of a hybrid situation. We had a few people in the office, but then eventually we start rotating, and now even from voice trading perspective, we have people in the office who can fully control this function.
Very good. Okay. Well, so you sort of touched on this topic a little bit in your answer to that, but considering technology as a differentiator, and again, we're looking forward, but I think it helped us a lot in the pandemic response. How do you see technologies like microservices, container technologies, cloud, software as a service, all these kinds of things? Sounds like you were drawing upon some of these already in place. How do you see them opening up opportunities for innovation in trading infrastructure going forward?
So let me take a little bit step back and give you a bit of a practical perspective on the subject, especially thank you for awarding practitioner award. So I give you my practitioner view of this. So what determines well-functioning market? So what well-functioning market requires care, trust, innovation, sustainability. So, and technology underpins all four of them. So as a result, the reason I'm talking about this is because, yes, during the crisis, we see that we had to rely heavily on the latest advances of technology to sustain what we our normal business model, but it also showed us that there is nothing now for technology to stop driving it further. And this is why what I see with my market structure hat on is how much regulators across UK and Europe and Americas are actually focusing on technological innovation and data. Definitely, for sure, I've seen on the FCA website somewhere key focus on technology innovation. They're looking into things like data sharing, open banking, cybersecurity, RegTech still here, absolutely, and of course cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is something which was very interesting to monitor, like from last year to this year, what's happening there.
Very good. And I think, we've often had regulators at this event, so hopefully we'll bring more back next time around. And some of the issues that you just mentioned, or topics that you just mentioned, we will be talking about in some of the subsequent panels today.
Andrew, you remind me, like, panels today, and something I didn't exactly finish answering your question. Because obviously I should mention the obvious in the room. So stuff like microservices and interoperability of the platforms. And I think you're going to have people talking today about this. This type of things is a focal conversations on the trading desk at the moment. I actually have traders who know what it means, and they asking me, when is my next widget coming along? And specifically in the context, how you can operate all these new trends alongside your old legacy systems. And we're not saying that, okay, legacy systems are bad, need to be replaced, because like in the big banks, it's actually, they serve a purpose. What we're looking into there, allowing new entrants, new microservices to work together with your legacy system to give your trading desk this complete environment. And of course, you mentioned data as well, very important. Cloud technology, all of this, absolutely something which we in the banking community looking daily into this.
Well, I think it's quite interesting. We've been talking about this term digital transformation, which is an easy catch-all term for all of these technologies. Forgive me if you don't agree with that, but I'm gonna call that the catch-all term. But this concept of digital transformation in the front office environment is something we've talked about for 2-3 years. You know well, you've been on the advisory board for this event and other events we've done. But it seems to me that the pandemic has been the catalyst for us to actually adopt these technologies and accelerate their adoption. And so as you see those things come to market, how do people measure success when they're implementing these things? What are the things that they take into account?
I guess there are two things in here. One, where you said yes, this crisis to some extent was a catalyst for us to see or maybe expedite certain development what potentially already started. But crisis aside, I think quite a lot of us were already on a road to implement those technologies, simply because new demand in the product offering, new demands in staying competitive already was driving most of us towards this innovation. So cloud technology, we're seeing what it does to Netflix, the likes of Netflix and so on. And we want to learn from those guys. Those guys obviously know what they're doing, and look at how robust they are as well. Because one of the things which we also shouldn't forget, it's all good to talk about all those new sexy things, microservices, interoperability, cloud. It's not new, but okay, eat things, things of the moment, things du jour, whatever you call them. But other things we shouldn't forget about as well. We still need to focus. Yes, there are a lot of good technologies there, and it's not only to enable you and drive your product to the next level, but also to provide your business with necessary resiliency where it's necessary. Because one of the interesting things which we have seen during past year is that during big volumes, we all seems to be operating fine. But what we've seen as well in certain parts of the industry, resiliency is still an issue. And it's not an issue from point of view of, I can't operate, but how fast I can recover from this.
Yeah.
So this is why on my sort of mental to-do list, to make sure that my systems are have this concept of, it's a software, it's a hardware, it's gonna fail. I know that it's gonna fail sometimes, and how fast I can recover from this. So this is almost like my next challenge. This technology not only need to give you this competitive advantage from a product offering, something like this, but also allows this from point of view of business offering, of proposition offering, gives me some sort of streamline access to the product where those outages almost invisible to the end user. How can we do that?
Yeah, very good, very good. Bearing in mind we've got to cover a lot of ground here and we've got a short amount of time, I'm going to jump to something a little broader, diversity and environmental issues. They've become board level issues for many firms, attracting significant attention in the media. What do we think that the industry needs to be doing to improve diversity, and how does this sort of sort of increased awareness of environmental issues manifest itself for people like us in the trading world?
Mm-hmm. Right, so I probably will start with diversity. It sort of all goes side by side together. So I think most of us on this call work probably for organizations that have dedicated charters on diversity, and different firms do it different way, whether it's given some sort of quota where certain percentage of employees need to be of certain race or certain gender and so on. And it's quite interesting that what we've seen post-COVID, we sort of steer away from just women in diversity. We're going in diversity full stop, like it's not only women, it's also race. So how can we make sure that our workforce actually has this representative from like members of of various communities as well? So from like when I was thinking about this a long time ago, and being a female in quite sort of like my robotics, I think uni, I was 4 out of 144. In my computer science in Manchester, I was in Manchester University as well. I was probably 6 out of 180 or something like this. So it's still minority. So why is it certain people within the community not attracted to certain let's say work opportunities? So like from me personally, I think we need to start quite early. We need to start with schools before A levels taking place. So just to educate people, there are so many opportunities out there, and to be open to these opportunities, you probably need to be more focusing on maybe math and physics and this type of subjects, rather than just going like politics and so on. So just making sure you just like talk to people about this, but at the very early stage of their development, basically.
Absolutely.
Going to unis, go to schools. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, as a daughter of 3 girls, I'm sorry, as the father of 3 girls, not the daughter of 3 girls, that would be quite interesting.
It's live. At least we can tell people we're on live stream. It's not like
yeah, exactly. This has not been edited, as you can tell. But yeah, as the father of 3 girls, it's something that you want to see more encouragement in the opportunities available to them, and certainly I think our industry can do more, and we'll be doing. One of my things is to sort of push that a bit more. We've sort of touched on this in the past, and I think we should really keep on touching on this topic as we go forward. Okay, not to waste time, but let's move on to final question from me to you, Irina. The breakdown in talks between the EU and the UK on equivalence. This, I guess, happened or was discussed at the weekend. How is this? What are the implications of this, and what do you think? How's this going to play out?
I think if I'm correct, I think we still have 5 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, so I still want to finish our previous conversation on diversity and.
Go ahead.
ESG, and I'm going to lead into the post-Brexit as well. Hopefully I have enough time. So with MiFID and Brexit now off agendas, like demand for ESG compliant products, and it's environmentally friendly, it's socially responsible, it's well governed, it's really high up on everybody's agenda. It's banks, organizations, it's a government, and it's regulators as well. So one of the tricky things with ESG is just making sure that people don't dress up ESG as something something which potentially not so much ESG. So again, this is where regulators coming along. I think EU regulators recently rolled out something called Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation,
yes,
where they will force firms to have strict disclosures on requirements. What do you actually consider to be its ESG fund or not? But it also leads somehow from, I feel like, and COVID gave a bit of oversight into this. How we mentally ready for this socially responsible challenges and changes within our organizations? So what was a measure of productivity before COVID time? Okay, my guy sits at the desk 24/7, unhappy, he's working hard. Yeah, this is sort of like, some of us think this way. Not some of us, but like some people do think this way. This guy is a hard worker because I see him at his desk like 24/7. So now COVID happened, people working from home. How do you know that your guy is a hard worker? So suddenly our mentality needs to be adjusted to different productivity factor. And hopefully this also will help us with automation. You will see where I'm getting to. Like there is a reason in my insanity. Because quite often we also see automation as a threat. Because we think, okay, we're gonna automate this work. It's mean that like we're gonna we don't have to pay those 10 people for this type of work. So new concepts should emerge, hopefully, that productivity does not rely on you being at home 24/7 or at your desk 24/7. Productivity measure, it will be how good you're doing your job. What is like a final outcome? And automation is there to help you to achieve this final outcome rather than take your job away and replace it with something else. So this is what I would call like socially responsible organization. So moving into the UK and the EU negotiations and everything what's happened, I think most of us who were working on Brexit programs had no illusion that we're entering Brexit with no equivalency. As a result, of course, all our technology and desks arrangements actually can handle European environment and UK environment. We also know that MiFID II is being reviewed, and now it's been reviewed from two angles. European Parliament, European Council reviewing MiFID, and of course Treasury and FCA reviewing MiFID, including government here as well. But what was interesting, what's come out recently from UK government, for example, last week, the Chancellor, he set out government plan for UK financial services. And what it highlights, it's very strategic importance of financial services in the UK. And the main focus here is to support and maintain UK as an open and global financial hub. So this is like, of course, it's very positive. And also last week, Treasury published consultation paper on wholesale market review. This is sort of MiFID II practices. Yeah. So the special things that we're focusing on the aspects of MiFID which discourage competition. For example, one thing they put in the spotlight is shares trading obligations, and the fact that like in the UK, in HMT views, the share trading obligation actually restrict access to global markets, and it's exactly run counter to UK government principle of openness and competition. So you can see that like what is very obvious right now, that UK government with regulators working more on what actually should be changed within the law to open up more competitiveness, like open up more sort of trends in here. And I definitely know that the idea of fintech hub or London being not London, UK, it could not necessarily be London, UK being a fintech hub sort of capital is definitely something on the government mind.
Very good. I think so. We're going to see some change coming up, we think, and we will respond accordingly as it comes through. We are going to quickly turn to Slido now and see if we've got some questions from the audience. Continuing on the D&I topic, how are you considering accessibility and platforms where the user experience caters for all of your workforce?
I might need clarification.
Yes, I think the question is about accessibility for basically giving everybody similar user experience from your internal systems, I guess. That's what I'm guessing this. But I would imagine you have this kind of thing in place already.
Well, this is it. Like, I don't think we have this sort of like the diversity of a user experience. It's all very role specific or function specific. So I think the idea in here is that make sure that you don't give sort of like just say it's not streamlined. It's sort of like similar, the same like content to all users, in making sure that all users can arrange their content as per their requirement. It should be very flexible, basically. So instead of giving everybody the same sort of like I don't know, like system, you make sure that they create their own desktop, for example, solution based on the functionality thereafter.
Yeah, and I think that really ties into, doesn't it, to the sort of digital transformation theme and modernization, so that people are not operating in siloed sort of system silos, but rather everything is drawn from a sort of common set of methodologies and data sets and so on and so forth. I think that's really where that's coming from.
Oh, in this case, yeah, it's definitely like I absolutely. It's not anymore like specific silos. It's making sure you have common set of data sets, but as well as customized user experience.
Absolutely. Good. Okay. Well, Irina, I know we could chat all day, but we're actually out of time now. So on that note, I would like to thank you for joining us and for sharing your great insight. Always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you in person next time.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much, Anne.
Brilliant. Thank you, Irina. Okay, let's see. Next up, we have a panel discussion. Panel topic is adopting a flexible and scalable cloud-based data infrastructure to support business agility and AI, perhaps touching on a little bit on what that last question was about. For this session, I'm going to be handing over to Bob Muda, partner at Multihub Digital. I can see him sitting there. Hi, Bob. How are you doing?
All right. Thank you very much.
Good, good. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know Bob, he manages Multihub Digital's regulatory and compliance and e-trading practices. Says here, Bob, we've got more than 25 years experience, which I find hard to believe, in blue chip investment banking institutions, and that your career has spanned a variety of business-facing technology roles, helping to support, enhance, and migrate systems.
Yes, thank you very much.
Great. Tom, over to you, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So yes, the panel today is concerning adopting a flexible and scalable cloud-based data infrastructure to support business agility and artificial intelligence. Shortly, I'm going to get the panelists to introduce themselves, but for everyone else in the audience, I'd just like to tell you how you can get involved in the discussion. You should see in your video a box for questions and polls. Partly through after question 1 and before question 2, we'll set up a poll, and so please get involved in that so we can help to understand industry opinion. Throughout the whole session, if people want to ask questions, they can do so, and I will try to interweave them in the session, or there's space at the end for Q&A. Great. So let's start with just getting the panelists to introduce themselves, and randomly I'm going to choose, because he's highest up in my Zoom box, Vijay. Do you mind giving just a short introduction about yourself and your firm?
Not at all. Thanks for having me here at Bob today. I'm Vijay Bhandari. I've been in the capital markets space for about 25 years now, and currently I am the technology principal for the innovation labs in New York for Deutsche Bank, and I also manage the innovation portfolio for the investment bank.
Brilliant, thanks. Nick?
Okay, thanks, Bob. So I've spent also around about 25 years working in finance and technology. I think it's clear that we've all done something terrible in a former life. But saying that, I've spent that time focused very squarely in the market data and messaging field. And in that time, I would be surprised if I haven't experienced every one of the major transitional milestones that we've experienced over that period of time. And here we are now, and I absolutely believe that we're on the cusp of another big change with market data in the cloud. So I now head a consultancy that is very much focused on delivering market data flexibility in both the technical and the commercial arena to the growing customer base.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Tim?
Thank you, Bob, and thanks to the A-Team group for setting this up. Tim Carmody, I'm the Chief Technology Officer for IPC. I guess I'm a little older than everybody. I've been doing this for about 30 years in the capital markets, with a heavy concentration over time on finance extranets. I spent about 20 years of my career at IPC, but I also spent 10 years at Radians, setting up and running the engineering for their extranet services. And in that, I agree with Nick. I mean, a lot of paradigm shifts we've seen. I think we're on the cusp of another one. And I think that spans not only market data, it also spans how trading execution's done. Obviously, IPC, we do a lot of voice trading support as well. That's definitely a major change. Blockchain and DLT is really on the cusp to change a lot of what capital markets does as well. And I think the various types of cloud models in general is really something that's a paradigm shift as well. So I'm very excited for this panel discussion.
Excellent. Right, let's get cracking then. So first question, just to set the scene, I'd like you all to think about the state of play with regard to cloud adoption in capital markets, and actually a slight twist as well, what the impact of the pandemic has been on cloud migration strategies. Let's Vijay, if you don't mind going forward first, that'd be great.
Sure. So I mean, it's quite clear that at this point, all the major financials are using public and/or private cloud to some degree, some more than others. Definitely, the pandemic has accelerated the use of the cloud and migration to quite an extent. You can see it, formidably in the video conferencing and collaboration tool space, where all our client conversations are now carried over Zoom. People aren't able to travel, and also in the space where we are hiring and training of new employees. That's also been virtual. I mean, we can't wait for people to get back. That's one area that's really difficult. But more so in the capital markets, on the trading side, what I've seen and heard a lot from different places as well is that there is a general migration from on-site workstations to cloud-hosted remote desktops, and that gives a lot of elasticity, redundancy, and it can also work towards lowering your costs of operations if you're one of those units that has traditionally maintained a second continuity of business redundancy site.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Tim, any thoughts?
Yeah. No, I mean, I certainly agree with Vijay that a lot of the adoption, particularly the pandemic, has sped it up and demonstrated the need for that flexibility and that elasticity, as Vijay said. But the other thing that was interesting is, the entire capital markets was not prepared for a remote working model, but it was clear that some companies were able to do it quicker, partly because of the technology investments they had made and because of how they were leaning into some of the new paradigms. I think that's going to continue, but what we're finding is that it's really a wide spectrum of different readiness, different willingness, different concerns in our customer base. And it's one thing to move, the more retail and consumer side, or the lower impact services to the cloud. You have to be much more methodical and careful as you're moving the trading operations because of the performance requirements, the sensitivity of it, and maintaining that competitive edge. So the industry is really still grasping what they can do with that, and I think it's going to be an interesting, next 3 or 5 years.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's interesting how anxious some of the regulators were about traders working remotely, and how some of the drive back to the office might be driven by that rather than natural, people not being able to work remotely. Okay.
Yeah, true.
Nick, is there anything that you'd like to come in on that one?
Well, I'm going to conveniently bypass that one. I think both Tim and Vijay have been at the sharp end of that over the past 12 months, and better hearing from them on that one.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, great stuff, guys. So let's. So we're now going to just have a break for the next question and look at a poll that hopefully should be turning up in your conference audience windows. The poll question is really around what do you as an audience members consider to be the biggest challenge in adopting hybrid and multi-cloud environments? So I'm going to read out the options that there will be: cloud governance, interoperability, adaptive security, data portability, and actually an interesting one here, talent to run a multi-cloud environment. Now, all of these, I think we'll all agree, are important in their own way, but it'd be quite interesting to see which one people think are the biggest challenge, which one keeps them most awake at night. So that should be quite interesting. So whilst we're getting responses to that, we'll move on to the next question. So here, so panelists, so when we think about the considerations to migrating workloads in a hybrid and multi-cloud environment, what would you consider to be the key considerations? What are the common problems and the pitfalls? You know, which ones, I suppose, would you wish you knew about before you'd started? So let's Tim, let's have your thoughts on that.
Sure. So, you know, first of all, I think there, in the eyes of you know, some senior management and all, you know, people tend to think of cloud as something that doesn't have to be as heavily engineered. It's just works type of model. Clearly, that's not true. If anything, moving workflows to the cloud, particularly when you get to the sensitive trading operation side of it, there's almost a need to be more methodical, right? You can't make any mistakes in this, and being able to highly engineer that model where you know exactly where your data is at any given time, you know exactly what your performance are, you have ways to monitor it and manage it and move things around as needed, and ways to have a more flexible model with hybrid cloud options, you know, I think is really key to the you know, to how you do this. There's a lot of different elements of that. I mean, you know, moving to a flexible SaaS model doesn't always have to mean it's a fully multi-tenant model, right? You can build single tenant models that are still, you know, highly flexible and give you the elasticity and the remote access for anywhere. You really have to, you know, take a lot of time and set an intention and a plan and understand exactly where things are at any given time and how to get there. So I'm interested to see about the talent to answer that question as well, because I do think that is one of the biggest challenges.
Brilliant, excellent. Thanks very much, Tim. Vijay, what's your perspective here?
I think all the options that you have in the poll are very big challenges for anyone that's making a large migration. But I have to agree with Tim. You know, talent is in short supply, and I think once you solve the talent, everything else you can deal with. It's just a level of complexity, and you have the tools to deal with it. There's a few things that I'd like to add here. One is that, you know, most companies go into multi-cloud because of two promises. They're able to do best of breed, and they think that it gives them better negotiating power, so it may lower their costs in the long run. But, you know, there's a few things and caveats to watch out for here. One is that even a single cloud migration strategy is very complex, especially in the capital markets, and there will be a large learning curve. So you have to be very well aware of that, and don't expect savings in the short run, because it's not really about that. It's more about having options and elasticity and the speed and the agility. Secondly, when you go into something that is a multi-cloud, your workloads need to be truly cloud agnostic, okay? Else you're just going to end up with cloud fragmentation and complexity, right? And the flip side of that is that when you start creating truly cloud agnostic solutions, you're kind of left with the least common denominator in terms of functionality that your vendors can provide you. So you're not able to do deep integrations and take advantage of the new and innovative services that any one of these vendors might provide you, because you're afraid to get locked in, right? So those are two caveats that I you know, that people should really understand before they jump into multi-cloud. And you know, who's it right for? It really depends on your use case and the level of complexity that your teams can handle.
Brilliant. Yeah, and in fact, I recognise that in all our experiences elsewhere across the street, all of those things are highly relevant. Just gonna have a quick look at the poll. The responses seem to have settled down. Okay, here you go. In fact, straight in front of us. So yeah, so up top, data portability, which we as a consultancy see everywhere. And then an even split of the rest: security, multi-cloud, governance, interoperability. Panelists, from your perspective, I think Tim and Vijay, you talked about the talent piece, but are there any other surprises in what you see here?
Not for me, Bob. I mean, I think this is a very difficult question to answer because they all are valid answers, right? And one of the things we had talked about before coming to the panel was intentionally not having an all of the above answer, because everybody would have said all of the above, right? So it doesn't surprise me that it's evenly spread across this really. Data portability, I am a little surprised that that's the highest number one, though. I would have thought security or talent would have been higher.
Perfect. Okay, brilliant. All right. And actually, I once did a little bit of work for a completely unregulated industry, and they thought that portability wasn't an issue until they were holding Chinese citizen data outside of China, and then suddenly data portability was an issue. So yes, we do see that.
Actually, just on that point, Bob, if I can just add that I actually suspect that what is behind the data portability stack is probably very much in the realms of compliance and legal. It's something that is very easily overlooked when focusing on a cloud-based migration, is to think about the technology. But so often it's the commercial contracts that are in place and the compliance constraints that will dictate what you can and cannot do, and where you can and cannot store particular data sets, that will become often the biggest hurdle. So whilst you're sitting there wrestling with technical complexity and winning those battles, you'll find that there are a list of lawyers and compliance officers that are throwing a very different and unusual set of curveballs your way. So for me, that's what I actually suspect is behind that profile.
Yeah,
you're probably right, Nick. Sorry, Bob. Just that data portability to me means something different, but you're right. The compliance angle is very, very important and does become something, to both of your points, that if you don't think about it up front and don't plan for it, you are going to get into trouble, either with regulators or with governmental situations.
And actually, I know that ESMA, I know we're not, UK is not really necessarily subject to it, but ESMA really has a real issue with traceability of data, and actually putting the onus on firms to say that actually I hereby swear that data is in the right place according to where it needs to be. So it's quite interesting. Actually, all of this topic is great because it leads on into the next question itself, which is about compliance in the cloud, and how you ensure compliance. So you talked about the data issues there, but what other areas are there that stick out in terms of compliance and for financial institutions, and how you might approach compliance with people's use of the cloud? Let's go for Vijay.
I think Nick started it off really well, and he kind of, for me, I think he hit the nail on the head there. We think of cloud migration more in terms of a technology challenge, but really compliance and regulation and proper governance structures really need to be in place, and they are as important, if not more sometimes. Aside from what people mostly talk about when in the US about GDPR and CCPA, there are many security and data access related concerns that also need to be met based on your internal requirements. What it comes down to is observability, policy management, access control, and security, right? These form the pillars of what makes compliance possible, right? So now, when you're on a migration path, what you really need to do is you need to get these teams involved in your migration discussions right up front, and make sure that these conversations are taking place. So what you ideally want to do is you want to have a dedicated work stream with all these teams involved, working with your CSP and your third-party vendors, and across all the applications and teams that are migrating, so that you have a common set of understanding and a center of excellence that kind of is giving uniform advice and direction to all that are trying to make it to the cloud.
Very interesting, actually. And Tim, you commented already, but it'd be great to understand how, you know, is there an approach to compliance for financial institutions, for regulated industries, where you don't take the fun out of cloud, if that makes sense?
I don't think you can say regulatory and fun in the same sentence, Bob. But but yeah, I mean, and this goes back to both Vijay and Nick's points. Really, you need to make sure that you have all of that governance in place, and you have all the right key stakeholders, and you have all the right sign-offs from the legal and risk and compliance officers and everything else in order to do that. But once you have that, then I think you can start really, you know, leaning into the technology again and understanding what the best options are for the technology. And one thing that struck me when Vijay was talking, when you talk about data portability and then talk about compliance, one of the things that does become interesting is, with all of the geopolitical changes that are happening in the world, what you may have as an acceptable answer today may not be an acceptable answer 6 months from now. And understanding how you would move data, if necessary, or bifurcate data into different countries, whatever the answer might be, you have to have a model that will allow for that flexibility up front. And maybe that's where the fun is, in creating a flexible model.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good stuff. I'd like to move on a little bit, if that's okay. So open up discussion. So part of the attractiveness, supposedly, for the cloud is getting market data accessed and provided through the cloud, but that has plenty of caveats and challenges. So what I'd like to ask the panel about is, what sort of barriers are there to migrating some of the core data consumers, like traders and portfolio managers, to cloud environments?
Maybe I'll take this one first. And there are many. I think it's a great question, because it throws up data-related challenges, and it also throws up commercial challenges as well. Certainly, up until now, most market data contracts are written in a way that doesn't lend well to a cloud-based deployment, where you have virtualized workstations. A lot of market data contracts are based on, you know, number of positions and such the like. So I think there is a real commercial challenge that has to be overcome. But then, even if we set that to one side, again, over the past couple of decades, there's been one principal data distribution technology that has been at the forefront of distributing market data messages around organizations, and the extent to which that, or potentially other distribution technologies, are stepping forward and emerging as the standard for a cloud-based market data distribution solution is yet to be confirmed. And for that reason, the lack of standard represents a little bit of a challenge. I could go on, but maybe I'll stop at this point and leave room for others to speak.
So if I may add a couple of points here, more from the technology perspective, what I've noticed so far is that at least for low or ultra low latency type applications, whatever we have in the public cloud is not going to match up with what the capital markets has been doing so far with their colos and direct feeds and their ability to do multicasting. And you know, what it really depends on the types of applications and their real-time needs, what their real-time needs are in order to be able to move them into the cloud. For market-making activities, it's still very challenging, and I see that perhaps that'll happen maybe in the next 2 to 5 years if the technology catches up and the cloud vendors open up certain aspects of the infra. But for other retail trading and back testing or portfolio construction, those types of activities are starting to move, and you can see that many cloud vendors have opened up API access to their data in the cloud.
Perfect. I mean, within CityHub, I have the dubious honor of being the last cloud heretic in CityHub, and a lot of that is because I grew up with e-trading, and like yourself, Vijay, I do wonder. at what point you'd be able to satisfy some of the timestamp requirements needed.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
You also wonder how big of that area, and I 100% agree with Vijay that the performance guarantees and the latency and being able to support the real heavy algo and HFT traders is going to be very, very hard for the public cloud to do it. You also wonder if it's a big enough problem and an area for the public clouds to focus on, given it's a very niche part of the market, really.
I mean, from what I've observed, I think the early adoption is certainly the very large data set intensive, very compute intensive AI implementations that throw up some pretty special challenges, because as a natural consequence of that, you start to become a little bit more creative with your thinking around the kinds of problems that you want to solve now that you have greater levels of compute and the ability to commingle more diverse data sets and perform compute with them. That throws up a huge number of challenges. We wouldn't typically have HR data commingled with P&L data sets and so on and so forth, but increasingly we will see those kinds of ambitions arising, and so getting the right governance structure around that to ensure that you don't fall foul is key. Yeah, there was a lot to this, but I think that the frontier, the guys that will be at the forefront of this are absolutely the AI guys that will be seeking to take as much advantage as possible of bringing together diverse data sets and leveraging the more cost efficient compute that is available to them.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think actually, so moving on from that, if we accept that there are some use cases where cloud-based market data makes some sense, what do you think, what sort of, if you like, tooling and approaches are there for making that transition for the if you like the use cases that do make sense? And alongside that, is there a role for market data ecosystems and market data providers to help with that transition?
Well, I'd say that there is. I'll attempt to do that in reverse. There is. I think for market data providers, they're facing some very real challenges here, because one of their key differentiators historically has been the level of connectivity that they're offering. And as that ceases to become a key differentiator, with the barrier to entry for connectivity being lowered, with many of the exchanges now offering a cloud connectivity-based solution, I think for a lot of the data providers, they'll be challenged to differentiate themselves by offering more tailored, more vertical differentiating solution sets with their data offerings. So in some ways it's great, because from a customer's perspective, they can anticipate a greater level of service, a more intimate and tailored level of data service. For the data vendors themselves, it absolutely presents a challenge, because old areas of clear divide are I think going to be diminishing.
Good. Tim, Vijay, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do see that. I see a lot of companies struggle to monetize their data, right? There is enough data to be had and shared, but how do you share it and in a way that who's using what, and are they is the commercial model right, is the billing right, and all that stuff, and really that's where marketplaces step in, because the uplift for everyone to do that is just way too much, right? And so what they're trying to do is to really make data that first-class product in a B2B and a B2C use case, and reduce the friction between the producers and consumers in this data economy. So there's definitely some vendors coming in, and, it's in the news, so everyone can read about it. Some of the big guys. So they're putting in the plumbing and all the everything else. So all you really need to do is bring your data and be able to share with people. So I think that's going to help the entire industry and in the long run.
And I think there's a role for ecosystems in that because it is such a changing tide now and shifting sands. Having the ability to have the flexibility and the maneuverability between different providers as this gets into new areas, new solutions, an ecosystem really helps you do that. And you should look at it more widely than just being pigeonholed into one area.
Yeah, I think a lot of that will be heavily dependent on the quality of entitlement control system, billing and metering system that is in place to allow for that B2B, more point-to-point relationship between data provider and data consumer. And as Vijay has alluded to, there are a few firms out there that are making big strides to solve this problem in a way that I think will probably transform this industry over the next couple of years.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Tim, Vijay, Nick, for your contributions. And I think we're about to wrap up. With that, let's. I think I need to hand back to Andrew. But thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, everyone, for participating and contributing and making my job as moderator really easy. Thanks very much, Andrew.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm just going to check, see if we've had any questions on Slido for this panel, because it's probably likely that we have. So let me just have a look here. Yeah, so a couple of questions in here, which I can throw out to the panel. How can we keep costs in check to ensure they don't spiral out of control? Obviously, cost is a major consideration. Thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Yeah, well, one thing I think Vijay alluded to this, and I had it in my notes, is there are a lot of cost blind spots when you move to a cloud model, particularly the public cloud providers, that you have to be very careful of. And I think this comes back to the comment around you have to have a methodical approach and an intention. You have to start having a plan and trialing those as you move and having flexibility, because the cost containment part of it can spiral out of control if you're not careful.
Sorry, go ahead.
What I was about to say is that most cloud providers have a set of rules and monitoring that you can put in place that will flare up alerts when you bypass certain thresholds to help you to keep things in check. And you need to put that into policy and make sure that it's applied systematically across everyone that you onboard.
And what I would add to that is to say that a cloud strategy that's done on a piecemeal basis, the very nature of that approach throws up some very real cost challenges, because for most finance houses or organizations, their compute profile is based on economy of scale. And so once you find an offshoot department that has decided to be the lightning rod in the cloud arena, now, of course, for them, their cost profile may start to look dramatically lower. But when you look at the organization as a whole, it may not ultimately result in a saving or a lower operating cost for the organization. So I think there is a very important need to keep an eye on the whole organization and the broader organizational strategy rather than a piecemeal department success.
Very good. Okay. Let's see. Just looking, there's a comment really more than a question. There's a note in here. It says, I think with FINMA now properly tenanted in AWS, the compliance argument isn't as big a hurdle as the problem of keeping data movement costs down for an application that's been moved to cloud, but is integrated with other apps that haven't yet moved or cannot move for other reasons. Any observations on that, remarks on that, guys?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very sorry there, Nick.
Okay.
That's a really valid concern, and Nick, I'm sure you have some great points on that. But you will see that across the board. I mean, we have, we have applications that have different types of data confidentiality and requirements, and a lot of them will never make it into the cloud, right? And there will always be certain types of analytics that you want to do that makes use of certain types of data that will not be able to move to the cloud. So you're going to see these class of applications that require the compute to move closer to the data, right? So you just have to figure out where that gravity is pulling, and is that a cost that you can bear, and you have to decide how you're going to do it. And it may mean that you have to keep 2 copies of the data so that you don't move it around as much.
Very good. Okay. Let's see. Are we done now for the? I'm just looking at these. Yeah, good. Okay. I think we're out of time for this session. So let me echo Bob's thanks to Nick, Vijay, and Tim. And thank Bob himself. Thank you, Bob. Great session, really insightful, really useful. As my old boss used to say, news you can use. Can't see fairer than that. Thank you, gentlemen. Look forward to the next time. Hopefully we'll do that in person, maybe. Anyway, this has been great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the next segment of today's show. We're going to hear a keynote now. Our topic is Capital Markets Enterprise 2021, Digitalizing for Competitive Advantage. Basically, the premise here is that if capital markets firms that believe their size will lead to continued market domination and longevity may well be well advised to look at the practices of innovative, fast companies that are leading technological evolution and digital reform to dominate the financial services sector. Now, for this one, we're going to be hearing from my friend Nathan Snyder, Head of Banking and Capital Markets Consulting at DXC Luxoft. I can see he's just arrived. Hello, Nathan. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Andrew. And yourself?
Very well. Really enjoying today's show. Thanks for joining us. Looking forward to your presentation. For those of you who don't know Nathan, he is responsible for banking and capital markets tech. Sorry, I'm getting my frog in my throat here. Banking and capital markets consulting at DXC Luxoft. He has a history of leading technology teams within sell-side firms, some worth mentioning: Credit Suisse, HSBC, Merrill Lynch, JP Morgan. Probably a much longer list, longer than my arm, you can see here on screen. Nathan, many thanks for joining us. Thanks for your insights, and I'm going to hand over to you now.
Perfect, thank you very much. Is somebody presenting the slides? Fantastic, thank you. So yes, today I'm here to talk about digitalizing for competitive advantage. If we could go to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So we used to talk about, big companies absorbing, taking over small companies, big fish eating little fish. And we don't really discuss that anymore, it's self-evident. But what we have started to discuss as an industry and globally is fast companies overtaking slow companies. Now, we all know the story of the response to the financial crisis. The regulatory burden increased massively, and this ended up squeezing margins, squeezing profits for financial institutions. And there were basically 2 potential responses to this situation. Some banks decided to cut their costs, they cut their way out, they cut their way to profit, and other banks decided to modernize and to address new markets and try to modernize their way to higher margins. Now, it's a big generalization, but the larger European banks tended to cut, the larger American banks tended to invest. Now we're in this strange situation where as you can see on the left of this slide, there are a number of banks that appear to be simply too big to fail. 56% of banks have a return on equity lower than their cost of equity. And that has to call into question their long-term financial viability. Now, my contention is that some of these organizations are being held in place by the regulations themselves. This is essentially a regulatory moat that prevents or becomes a significant barrier to new entrants in the market and maintains some of these organizations in their position of having concerning financials, but still being with us. Now, being too big to fail is not the same as being competitive in the marketplace. And those banks that did pursue a strategy of modernization and digitalization didn't see an ever-escalating set of costs. As they addressed new markets, they didn't just see the cost of their technology stack exponentially increase. What they found was they had an increased ability to compete. Effectively, they reduced the time it took them to take new products to market for their clients. They could onboard their clients faster. They could provide robust, risk-managed access to new markets quicker. And not only for those banks is their return on equity greater than their cost of equity, which is always a good thing, but in addition, their operating expenses as a percentage of assets has declined, as you can see from the right. So there may be banks still out there that are too big to fail, but they're also becoming too slow to compete, and we're getting into a two-speed race in our industry. So we have an opportunity to ask some audience questions, and this is my opportunity to ask the first question, and we're going to look at the results at the end of the presentation. But the first question is, how quickly is your organization able to bring new financial products to market? How long from that initial idea to deployment in production? Are we talking about a month? Is it within a quarter? Within the financial year? Or does it take over 12 months to complete that process? Be very interested to see what people have to say. If we could switch to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So not only has the banking marketplace changed, but the environment in which we sit has changed quite significantly as well. Now, we've already talked about one of those drivers, and it's the regulations. Now, the best way to illustrate this is through an example. So derivatives pricing. This used to be a proprietary calculation, and banks could debate differences of valuation between counterparties. But we now have UMR, the uncleared margin rules. Counterparties are now compelled to trade derivatives through clearing, and where it's not possible to trade through clearing, they have to declare their valuation to the market. And in the event that they and their counterparty have differing opinions on the valuation, both counterparties have to hold punitive collateral to cover that difference. Now, originally this was 30 organizations under UMR. It's now over 1,000 as of last year. So we've moved in this very area from a situation where it was beneficial to hold a proprietary differentiating calculation to an area where standardization actually lowers your cost. This has become a non-differentiating activity because of the regulations that have been imposed. And that's a trend we've seen in a lot of areas. Regulations have reduced the number of domains where a bank can really differentiate itself. Now, while the number of non-differentiating services has increased, there's been another change, and that's at the bottom of the slide, which is the partner ecosystem has expanded. So we'd always be faced with some very straightforward choices. Are we going to build technology in-house, or are we going to buy some licenses? Every so often we would, package up some operations and outsource it to a business process outsourcing organization. But now the options are manifold, right? There are obviously the hyperscalers providing all their cloud services, their platforms as a service, etc. Those companies that were selling us licenses are now often, in the vast majority of cases, selling us subscriptions as software as a service. There are industry utilities. There are options to outsource your entire back office if you want to. So not only are there more non-differentiating areas, but there are more partners to help address those non-differentiating areas. If we could move to the next slide, please. So what this really means is that as technologists in financial services, we have a new mandate, and that is to identify the non-differentiating areas and standardize in those areas through partnership with others, and then to identify the differentiating areas and to apply our focus and our investment there and be innovative in our attempts to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. So I've got a couple of examples of that up on this slide. On the left-hand side, there's the digital multi-hub. So there are a number of financial institutions that have started to provide digital asset services to their clients. You know, I think Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley were among some of the early movers. Standard Chartered, you know, has followed suit along with a number of other organizations. And they're basically providing, you know, Bitcoin, Ethereum trading, et cetera, to their clients. Now, in the very short term, there's a first mover advantage in being one of the early banks to provide that service. But that's going to go away very quickly. And in the long term, this is the provision of digital asset trading is a non-differentiating service. Now, what you do with those digital assets, how you provide them, how you price them, that's differentiating. But the underlying technology that allows you to provide the service is not. So Luxoft is working with a set of clients to build an industry utility. We've got some existing ledger technology, multi-custodian connectivity, etc., combined it with the blockchain technology to basically provide a digital asset multi-hub, lowers the cost of each digital asset transaction. Now, on the other side, where you can differentiate, as I mentioned, it's important to be innovative. And so I'd like to introduce you to Alexei. This bald tattooed gentleman is one of our consultants. He shaved his head specifically for this project, and he's wearing an emotive Epoch X device. Now, this is a device which reads brainwaves. And within DXC Luxoft, we're conducting a project with one of our clients to provide access to financial services functionality for people with severe disabilities. So in this particular project, we're designing an interface that allows a user to use facial expressions and brainwave recognition technology to navigate a financial portal. And this is a small example, but it's a fantastic example of something that is socially responsible, it's value add, and it shows how clients who are digitally forward can look to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. So now we come to the second audience question, which is, has your organization started this journey? Have you started to outsource your non-differentiating services? I'm very interested to see this one actually. So, you know, is the answer yes, you have a comprehensive strategy in place and you're powering down that path? Is it yes, it started in some areas, it's nascent? Is it that you haven't started, but you're planning to start? Or interestingly, have you not started and also you don't plan to? You actually want to retain everything as a bespoke build in-house? We'll take a look at those answers at the end of the presentation shortly. If we could go to the last slide, please. Thank you. So this entire setup is quite interesting, and it's quite an exciting time to be in financial services technology. We have the sort of empirical evidence that digitalization brings competitive advantage. We have the luxury of having fewer areas where we can differentiate so we can be more focused, and a wider ecosystem of partners to help us with those non-differentiating areas. And what this is it's a continuation of the evolving journey of the CTO, where CTOs have a significant responsibility in enabling their businesses to be successful. To paraphrase Jamie Dimon's famous line, it's about banks needing to become technology companies, because the business drivers are the technology drivers. It's delivering value faster. enabling business change, it's improving profitability. These are technology concerns, these are CTO concerns. And in order to do that, we need to juggle many dimensions of improvement. We obviously need, those continuous deployment pipelines to deliver products into production faster. We obviously need a foundation of stabilized production services. We need data collection and data analytics tooling so that the decisions can be made driven off real facts and insights. And we need to have agile environment management. And then sitting on top of all of those capabilities, we are then able to leverage commodity platforms for our non-differentiating services and lower the cost per transaction and focus our efforts on building innovative and differentiating features to support our business. Okay, thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you, Nathan. Thanks very much for a very thought-provoking piece. You said you were going to review some of these poll questions. So should we do that now? I think that'd be quite good.
Fantastic.
Let's see. So the first question you had was, how quickly is your organization able to bring new financial products to market? And the overwhelming response is that we could do that for you in a year or so. What's your response to that? Does it surprise you? Are you encouraged, discouraged? What do you think?
Well, actually, it's not surprising. I'm very encouraged that there's a quarter of respondents saying within a month. I mean, one of the sort of annoying factoids and bugbears in financial services technology is the fact that almost every business partner knows this tidbit, which is Amazon releases code into production every 12 seconds, which is a very difficult standard to be held against. But, banks have traditionally looked at annual budgeting cycles. Projects tend to be planned in a way whereby they can deliver value or meaningful code into production within a financial year. We are obviously trying to get out of that model. It's a shame that there are still some organizations talking about over a year. It's great that 25% are saying within a month, because really those are the sort of timescales which are meaningful in the marketplace. If there's a new product to trade, being able to get that out there in a robust and risk safe way or risk managed way within a month, that's a meaningful release cycle.
Well, it's actually very interesting. When I was a whippersnapper, Nathan, financial services was the hot, and particularly financial services technology was the hot employer of the age, and today I see a lot of young people going to Googles and AWSs and the like. It sort of gets into some of the things that I was discussing with Irina earlier on. But if you have this enthusiasm that we may be, and I think that came out of the last panel as well, that we may be entering a new era where we might be appealing again to a new breed of budding technologists, and let's hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think those huge technology stacks, which we had to maintain in the past, which sort of led to that talent flight, or at least the attraction of new talent to other industries, if they can be commoditized, outsourced, shared, we can start to focus and really provide opportunities to do interesting work.
Absolutely, and again, Irina and I were quite struck by the robots in the house ad, the commercial break at the beginning. Okay, so let's have a look at the next poll question. Has your organization started to outsource non-differentiating services?
See, this is fantastic, and this one I really wanted to just know the answer, because this is something that we really believe is the future within DXC Luxoft, and really wanted to see what people's opinions are. I think it's very telling that the vast majority of people have started on that journey, and out of the remainder, most of them are planning to continue on that journey or to start that journey themselves. It is slightly surprising to see some people really plan to maintain everything as an in-house build. I think one of the difficulties with this change, obviously, is there's upfront investment. Even if you're purchasing or buying into a utility that a third party is going to provide, making that change internally does cost money. and the return is seen sometimes over several years. So there are barriers to organizations creating those business cases and being able to absorb and respond to those business cases. But the argument is there. It's very unlikely, and it'd be very interesting to see examples of where people can provide lower cost per transaction through an in-house build of something which is commoditized in the marketplace.
Yeah,
it is possible, but it's unlikely to happen across the board.
And does this poll result mirror your experience, Nathan, when you're out talking to your clients?
I think it does. Most people have started this. Very few people have a comprehensive strategy. And but most organizations are encouraged by this. I mean, when we tend to be provider-led in our industry, we had the RPA, the robotic process automation boom, because the RPA companies invested very heavily in product sales and went and approached both the technologists and the operations users. We're now seeing the hyperscaler boom, the same idea, where the hyperscalers have invested very heavily in recruitment. They've got some really intelligent people there, and they're approaching their client base. So people are definitely having their heads turned in this direction, and it's just about making sure that we can complete that journey.
Absolutely. A couple of questions coming in on Slido. We've got a few minutes left, so I would encourage people to ask their questions through the Slido device. First one here, Nathan, what would you recommend as the first step for organizations looking to become more agile?
Okay, it's an interesting one, and the answer to this question is the one that you'd expect, which is really to assess your own unique situation. It's agile is always about, an agile provisioning of technology is always about cultural change. It's about aligning the business and the technology into a new way of working and making them both understand that going through this process will accelerate the business. These ceremonies, they're not bureaucracy. They're not there because people enjoy them. They are enablers of business change. And as always, complete that assessment and then work out where your POC is. Celebrate it, promote the results, and get people excited about it, because without the cultural change, the technology change very rarely follows.
Very good. This is an interesting one. It says, where do you see potential for non-differentiating services? I mean, it's a fallacy to believe that you shouldn't worry about non-differentiating services, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure people see, will see potential everywhere. I can think from my experience, I have a background in client data, it's one of the hats I've worn, which, and you can see there that, for example, client onboarding can be very differentiating, right? That how quickly you can get your client from a conversation to trading a product, to authorize to trade a product, and how simple you can make that journey and the interaction points. However, maintaining a client data set, auditing that data set, maintaining versioning, etc., it's really something which the enterprise data management tool providers can do for you. And they're all moving to a software as a service provisioning. So its licenses and subscription models are available. It's non-differentiating. Another great example, and again, I'm drawing on my past, is regulatory reporting. I can remember racing to the finish line to meet a certain regulation, and the regulations being clarified as we were developing the technology. And the idea at that point of outsourcing the bank's responsibility to a third party who was also going through that journey of understanding, it would have been foolhardy. So we built in-house, and we built it fast, and we built it sort of quick and dirty. Now, to maintain a regulatory reporting infrastructure, which is really non-differentiating over a period of time when it can be outsourced and the cost can be lowered, it doesn't make sense. Again, it's non-differentiating, and it's not only is it the cost per report, but it's also the management time and attention which is being taken away from areas where the bank can really compete. But those are just two examples from my history, and I'm sure other people will come up with a lot more.
So do you see it sort of a life cycle, if you will, where early on there's a need for, proprietary, internal, secret source kind of thing? We go, this is going to be a differentiator. because it's in response to something. It could be a reg, could be a new opportunity, new type of product, digital currencies maybe, whatever. But over time, as the market matures or the situation matures, we get into a situation where we can start to release some of that to more commercial third-party offerings and turn our attention to other things that might become more proprietary, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that classic thing that there's a bold new frontier, either imposed from a regulator or there's an opportunity somewhere, and we can all race towards it. There's the first mover advantage. There's different approaches to the problem. There's different ways to tackle it. And eventually the industry starts to converge. And at the point when you have multiple organizations tackling the same problem the same way, not differentiating themselves from each other, that's the point at which it just needs to be built as a utility, commoditized, outsourced, whatever you want it to be.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, we are out of time. Nathan, thanks so much. Really a thought-provoking presentation today. Enjoyed the discussion. And I look forward to welcoming you back next time we do something like this. It'd be great.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay, so we're going to move on now to our next panel, getting to some nuts and bolts, if you like, optimizing trading infrastructure for high performance in fast markets. This last year has seen trading firms having to manage high volumes of volatility, adding extreme pressures to trading infrastructure, making it more important than ever to get connectivity, delivery, and trading infrastructure right in terms of performance, reliability, measurability, and cost. I am going to be handing over moderating duties to my old friend Ian Salmon, who I can see has arrived. Hello, Ian. Great to see you.
Hi.
Ian is director of Ignite G2M. They are a specialist in front office trading technology, but in his past and for his sins, Ian ran Fidessa Equity and then Futures and Options Business Development, worked with MiFID II working groups, time stamping, crumbs, Ian, it must have been murder for you. And subsequently, through consultancy, you've been involved in the launch of various trading platform analytics and performance monitoring services. So well equipped to run this one. Over to you, Ian. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Andrew. And welcome to our panel, Optimizing Trading Infrastructure for High Performance in Fast Markets. I'm pleased to be joined by experts in their field from both investment banks and service providers in the space as we take a look into the themes driving tremendous trading volumes over the last year and the technology developments keeping the market functioning. I'll ask our expert speakers to introduce themselves in a moment, but first, here's how you can get involved in the discussion. To the right of the video, you will see a box for questions and polls. We will be running a poll question shortly, so fingers on the buzzers. Please vote and help us to gauge industry opinion. If you would like to ask the experts any questions, we will take questions from the audience through the discussion. So please feel free to add yours to the box under the questions tab. So I'd like to start by asking our panelists for the customary 1-minute intro about themselves and their firms. So please, starting with Jason, please.
Hey, hopefully everyone can hear me. Super happy to be here on the panel today. As I was preparing my notes, I realized I've worked in this industry for 25 years. So coming up on a big anniversary here, although I absolutely don't look as if I must have started as a young boy. But I spent time in Thomson, Reuters, Multihub, some great years there, and finally ended up at TD, focusing on trading platforms, building high-performance trading platforms in fixed income, currencies, and equities. And at TD, we're really focused on building high availability platforms, really get the availability there for our customers, the consistent performance, and always be there for our customer. It's critical. And and our focus now is, with things like cloud pivots. We announced an acquisition in the last couple of days. TD's like really looking to build the next generation of trading platforms. So really excited to be part of that. And thanks for letting me be part of the panel today.
Thanks, Jason. Welcome aboard. Nikhil, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Ian, for having me on the panel. I'm Nikhil Singhvi. I work at Credit Suisse, and my focus has been more about the core trading technology. And core trading technology pretty much refers to everything or most of the things that an algo would need to perform. It like client connectivity, all the incoming order flow, the market data, the routing of the orders, the exchange connectivity, sending the orders to the exchanges, low latency market data, regulatory reporting, and the pre-trade checks, as well as the portal that we have for our clients to send the order flow. So those are some of the things that I work on, and we pretty much go across most of the asset classes. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nikhil. And Judith?
Hi, thank you for having me today. So yeah, it's been a long time as well here. We're all getting old. It's been 15 years. I've been working in this industry for 15 years now. I started at Bloomberg, and then I moved into the connectivity world. And I've been enjoying my time at BSO for the last 5 years. And just in a nutshell, just for you to understand, although I think everyone knows who BSO is. So we're a global independent and pioneering infrastructure connectivity provider. We own and provide mission critical infrastructure, including network connectivity, cloud solutions, hosting and managed services for data intensive businesses. And BSO network comprises fiber and RF, with a presence in more than 240 data centers, connecting the major exchanges, crypto and traditional exchanges, with low, predictable and stable latency. We also provide access to more than 40 cloud on-ramps, and our network is integrated with all major cloud providers. And finally, we connect to 75 plus on net internet exchanges. And as I said, I really enjoyed my time in BSO because it's a company that focuses on technology and customer satisfaction. So it's a pleasure to work here. Thank you for having us.
Thanks. I won't try and add up the collective years we're going to have as we go through. So I'm going to leave Robert to his tea because he looks like he's enjoying that. I'm going to ask Steve next.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm Steve Morton from CJC. We're a technical and commercial managed service provider. We're exclusive to the capital markets. We're leveraged by hundreds of firms across the capital market spectrum, and we define it internally as we support the critical message delivery platforms which distribute various forms of, like, market data, trade data, post-trade systems, and so on. Latency sensitive real-time data around or into and around their global operations. We do that with a combination of world-class IT monitoring tooling, and we've also built our own in-house products which do observation analytics as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Steve. And Robert, go for it.
Hey, everyone. I've been in the industry for just over a decade now, previously building low latency trading systems for some of the Canadian banks. I now head up the Options IT Canada operations, and Options IT is a managed service provider focused in the financial vertical, building dedicated cloud systems for our clients and infrastructure.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Just by means of intro, really. So it's been an unprecedented year. We've seen similarly unprecedented volumes. So as I looked at something to prove this rather than just talk about it, I looked to the World Federation of Exchanges. And if you look at their monthly volumes in exchange traded instruments, they've almost doubled over 2021 versus 2019, with exchange traded derivatives volumes tripling at some points compared to the same period in 2019. So we're going to open with a poll question, and I invite you to cast your vote. So over to Slido, and Poll question number 1. Market volatility and volumes have increased significantly over 2021. Is this a COVID effect? And do you expect markets to stabilize now or continue to be volatile? And your choices are: market volatility and volumes will stabilize as the global pandemic situation becomes controlled, or market volatility and volumes will continue to be volatile for some time, or other factors are causing these trends and volatility and volumes will continue to rise in future. So while we're voting, we'll ask the panel the first question. So starting with Jason, please, and then Nikhil. What do you make of these consistently high volumes, and how has this impacted the technology side of the bank? What kind of changes are you making to your technology stacks to keep your edge?
So I feel we talk about this every year on this this panel discussion. It's like, oh yeah, market volumes have spiked and they've gone crazy again. And is it Brexit? Is it the US election? Is it pandemic? And I look back and around 15 years ago, I did actually a project for one of the big banks, and they were taking a forward-looking view of how to deal with these problems. And there's concepts around 10x 10x capacity. You need to sort of factor in 10x. So we've been building with a view that you're going to have these crazy days. You're going to have huge volume spikes. You're going to have huge surges of activity, and they're just part of BAU. That is just part of normal, and that doesn't mean that we didn't have to make some changes, but we always plan to change. We always plan to be ready with the next thing. To turn up the dial. During pandemic, there were some particular events where we worked with our managed service provider, to ramp up our network connectivity. It was actually done in a few minutes before we started trading. We upgraded the global capacity on our network, but we planned to do that. We knew we would have to do it at some point, so we pre-planned those things in. So we have seen client liquidity migrate from the phones into E, and we don't expect that to return. So we've seen that, but I think as we look to the future, we're just looking to incorporate newer technologies into our server stack. So 100 gig into servers, that kind of thing, just to make sure that we're always prepared. But pandemic was an interesting year. I think it caused a lot of there were a lot of volatility events, but I think it's business as usual for us market data professionals. We're used to this kind of conversation. Nikhil?
Sure. Look, first of all, it's a good thing that the volumes increased over the last 18 months or so, because in the past, depending on the products, some markets were doing more volumes and some markets were doing lesser volume. So overall, it was a welcome change. I think the second piece, in terms of when the volume increases, it doesn't impact every area in the same way. I mean, certainly the network or the market data, pretty much it impacts everybody. You need to be ready for that. But some other pieces, given where the volume increase is coming from, like if it is a lot of retail volume, it may not affect every firm in the same manner. Having said that, you need to have the right monitoring for the peak rates, because you need to know when are you getting close to the peak and how do you add the capacity for that peak. To the point that Jason talked about from a network perspective, certainly you can increase your network capacity, but at the end, you need to also have switches that can handle that kind of network capacity. So you need to continue to pre-plan, and you need to continue to have that set up to be able to really expand as you go, or expand when you can. In terms of, again, from a market data or some of the other trading systems, you need to be able to do horizontal scaling as and when you need. Whereas for some other applications, whether it is regulatory reporting or whether it is booking or whether it is your kind of end of day settlements or reconciliations or other things, you can utilize the cloud. So it's a combination of everything that we are looking to do, just so that we are successful day after day.
Great, thank you, Jason. Thanks, Nikhil. So some crazy days, but it looks like the theme is visibility is king, and knowing how to plan ahead. Similar question to our technology providers on the panel then, please. What impact have the increases in volumes had on you and your clients in particular? So maybe over to Judith first.
So, well, for us, actually, it was fantastic because our network was ready for these bandwidth increases. And our network is 100 gig all around the world. And basically what we've been asked in the last few months, it was network upgrades, bandwidth upgrades, and we were ready for it. But most importantly, I think that because the way we manage our network and the way we manage the bandwidth allocation, we don't provide any bursting options to our customers, because this will lead to a moment where, if you give bursting options, then you will run out of bandwidth. So we know exactly how much bandwidth our customers are using. We allocate the dedicated bandwidth, and then if we see that there is any peaks or they are dropping packets, then we will contact the customer and make an upgrade, and it's done within seconds because we have the availability. So we don't oversubscribe, and we don't provide bursting to manage better the bandwidth usage. So yeah, we were ready, and it was a great year for us, to be honest.
Fantastic. And same question to Rob.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'd echo most of the sentiment that's been said by Nikhil, Jason, and Judith, right? Like, different business lines have been impacted due to COVID and due to the drive to E, right? Fixed income and equities specifically. Definitely our clients in those space, I don't anticipate anything winding down in that as a result of COVID or going back to the office. In fact, depending on how you split up your business, the E-Desk is probably very happy over the last 18 months in seeing the revenues drive through on their side. I think a big piece to kind of summarize everyone else's comments and add my own is around transparency in your stack and creating that from not only a software perspective, but from an infrastructure perspective. I think COVID has really proven that it's not good enough to be reactive. And to be honest, probably not even good enough to be proactive, but instead being able to arm our clients with the data they need to make those decisions and when to upgrade, how to upgrade from the most cost-effective manner, and timeliness. And I think that's been a big focus for options over the last 18 to 24 months.
Okay, we've had a question come in. I'm going to hit this one quite early since you mentioned cost, Rob. Where should we draw the line between cost and network performance? So I think probably we want to talk to Jason and Nikhil from that point of view. Yeah. Because I think the answer is going to be interesting.
I think it's the worst day in the market can be your best day. Yeah. So if you have the capacity there, you will more than cover your network cost. Your investments in network. If you don't have them, the downside effect of that can be pretty significant. So I think the Judith mentioned like bursting, and anybody who knows me knows that I'm religiously against quality of service, traffic shaping, and all of those things to try and squeeze stuff into a smaller pipe. My view is that MAN and LAN comms is pretty cheap now. 100 gig pipes are for in a metro area for nothing. Relatively. So some people might describe it as overcapacity. I don't think it is. 10x capacity costs double the cost of just costs you double, and I think it's a worthwhile investment for the business. I think people who struggle with that cost have not managed to articulate that to their business partners effectively, and that's the gap.
I agree, Jason. It's the same thing with the protection. So I understand that some of our customers are very latency sensitive, which means that if the line goes down, which they go down, there can be a shape that is breaking a fiber, or it can happen many things, but you have to be prepared, because if you say, okay, I don't want to be out of I want to be out of the market if I'm not in the lowest latency, what if you have a position that you cannot close? So, you know, like we always encourage the customers to get an alternative, to get redundancy, even if it's not going to be used, and we can engineer it to make it not automatic, so they make the decision when they want to go on protection. But I had in the past customers where they were like, we're out of the market, we have a position to close, and I was like, I told you. And obviously, because we have the capacity, we switch it on quickly, but this is not the way people should be working. They have to take in consideration any factors.
Yeah, I think that maybe one more sort of area to add. So talking about MAN and WAN connectivity, there's some principles. I think if you look at LAN connectivity, and the ultra lowest latency switches and that kind of technology, there is a value price point, and there's a function between the capabilities and features and functions that you might get out of a switch, versus the latency capabilities that it has. And you need to trade those off, and you need to understand, the actual business flow, to understand whether you're going to get benefit from that, or you get benefit from, resilient features rather than resilience from absolute latency. So that's something that we're looking at all the time, is like, okay, how do you balance those two rewards versus the costs?
Very good. Right, I'm going to take us back, before we forget what it was, to the poll question. So, and that's a pretty resounding conclusion. So the question was, market volatility and volumes have increased significantly over 2021. Is this a COVID effect, or will it continue to be volatile? And the 57% say market volatility and volumes will continue to be volatile for some time. So, I mean, that plays to your points really about, planning for 10x capacity and more crazy days, Jason. But if I can just get a quick sweep of your views, probably Steve, if we can ask you first.
Thanks. I was very much of that mindset. I think for me, and Ian, you mentioned it earlier, I think one of the great barometers today and historically has been things like, market data update rates and the amount of market data messages which get created. We see this information, this is very much being used still via support teams, capacity managers, but we're finding this where the trade floor themselves and the application owners are looking at these volatility stats now. So we saw it ourselves when we had the sort of big peaks of COVID between sort of like March and June last year. It was those indicators which were giving some of our clients potentially 2 weeks sort of notice on, where they're potentially going to be. And I remember about 10 years ago, it was, the classic, where updates rates tend to go up by 30% year on year. But as you said, Ian, they're saying they've doubled in the last 2 years, COVID or not. And I've been able to look at our own clients and our own systems and analytics, and we've been able to verify that ourselves with our own stats. And, that's when you get to that period where things did sort of stabilize after the peak, you're still seeing that big trend of upwards behavior. So as Jason has said, it's kind of the BAU of what market data professionals do. But it really feels like we're now in an era where volatilities are more of a new normal, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Nobody knows where we're going to be in the next few weeks, few months, or next year potentially. So, positions can change, and that can lead to volatility.
So I'm going to stick with you, Steve, just for a second. So we've talked about the volumes, we've talked about planning and the fact that we want to keep ahead of the game. What do you see as the latest developments in the actual network and connectivity services themselves? Are you seeing innovation alongside just pure infrastructure improvement and scale up?
Like one of the things for us at CJC, we work with the clients, so wherever the clients need us. So we're in a multitude of different data centers and client locations and co-located with exchanges and things. But one of the things which has happened for us is that we've moved our own IT monitoring and our own, we've got like a big data observational platform where we take all the IT metrics and provide that information back, so to do capacity management and so on. We've moved that to cloud, specifically GCP, and so by proxy, our clients have moved as well. So I just want to be clear there, you know, many of our clients are still residing in their traditional locations, but it's the monitoring that we provide of those systems and the storage of those metrics that we have moved to cloud. Now, what we found is for some of our clients, you know, this was the first time that they'd, you know, leveraged public cloud technology, or maybe it was the first time they'd used Google. So they were using AWS or Azure, but they hadn't used Google yet. And this is where I really felt that the data center and the telcos were fantastic. They really actually aided our migration and our direction of things. So, you know, for some of the firms which maybe have raised an eyebrow to it, we were getting very quickly from their networking teams, well, this is great, you know, this, you know, comments like this is as good as a cross connect, and from a cost or a bandwidth or resilience perspective. But what was also important is things like the documentation. So, you know, the data centers, telcos, and cloud providers, in many ways, they're the data processors, but it's us as a company who are the data owners. And that's where we get placed on from an IT security and IT risk. So, you know, a lot of the banks were giving us, you know, 600 questionnaires and things. And so everything had to, all the I's had to be dotted and all the T's crossed and so on. So, you know, where we were potentially expecting some roadblocks, you know, the data centers and telcos really had everything, you know, all the information at hand. So that was really where we feel like an adoption of some of these cloud access services were fantastic. And one of the things which has happened with CJC recently is that, you know, we've partnered with BT Radians, so we're an on-net provider. So, you know, you've got an on-net telco providing these services, but we as CJC, we're providing our services actually from the cloud itself. So that's been one of the developments which we've seen.
Same question to Judith, please, around the developments in itself in the tech.
Yes, so first of all, I wanted to say, yeah, we have seen that the change on especially on the crypto industry, that they are moving out of the cloud, and our customers are using more and more clouds. So now we can connect private cloud to public cloud, and cloud to data center. So we have seen that there are more different routes, different connectivity. Before it was like London, New York, Tokyo, Singapore, and now we can see other data centers that are taking more space and that they are taking more importance for our customers, especially, as I said, in the crypto industry. And then technology-wise, in the connectivity services and in the network industry, what we've been investing more in the last few years is in the Holocore Fiber. So I don't know if you know what it is, but when you have a fiber, the light inside the fiber goes like this. So there was this technology that was used in other industries, but not not so much in the finance industry and in the telco industry, with some, I'm not very technical, but with some, I think they put some air inside and it makes it go straight. So basically, if you have fiber, if you have light inside a fiber, it will go like this. So you're wasting a lot of time. And in this race to zero that we are pioneering, I hope, and our customers, having this Holocore Fiber, it allows the fiber to go straight, so it reaches the speed of light in the air, exactly the same speed. So we have developed this technology and implemented it, especially in our RF network. So from the antenna inside in the last mile in the data center, we put Holocore Fiber, which allows the latency to reduce significantly. And again, the main focus on the next years, it will be again RF technology and would like to provide more bandwidth on the long haul and also reduce the latency. And finally, I think what is very important as well is the integration with the feed handlers, the market data manipulators before this data, this information gets pushed into our network.
Fantastic. Right. We're going to be quick fire now because we want to get on to another poll question. Thank you for your answers so far. So the next question is, how satisfied is your organization with the effectiveness of its trade infrastructure performance monitoring? So we talked about lots of aspects of performance here, but specifically, are you very satisfied that your systems and analytics are as good as they can be? Fairly, with a little more work is needed? Satisfied, but more work is needed? Not satisfied, a lot more work is needed? Or really not satisfied at all? This is a big problem. So let's launch that as a question, and I'd like to turn back to the panel while we're voting and ask the panel the same question. How effective is the monitoring and the metrics of trade infrastructures, and how are analytics in particular developing in this space? So I think this is probably one again for maybe Rob to start and then Jason to respond.
Yeah, sure. I think that the analytics in this space are probably the key point. The effectiveness, I would imagine that everyone here hopefully is monitoring their infrastructure end to end in various points inside their network. But specifically when we talk about how analytics are developing, I think there's a huge focus around predictive events, AI around lifespan of appliances, looking for abnormalities across connectivity, just from a security standpoint. When we talk about trading infrastructure specifically, we're looking at things such as trading latency, positions, depending on how granularity you're getting into the server, congestion, etc. I would say that the analytics developing in that space are really about pushing the query to the data instead of the data to the query in that regards, and how we monitor that for our clients. A big piece there is, again, around the transparency and providing people the ability to get that data on demand when they need it. Seeing their infrastructure in real time. I think it's been a journey, but as we go, we only see more and more collection of data and the ability to drill down into it for our clients. And I'm sure I'll hand it over to Jason, but I'm sure that's a big point. Gone are the days of just looking at latency between two servers or 2 points. I think that's just table stakes now.
Yep. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think I was reading the poll question, and it's like I think we're pretty good at this stuff, yeah, but we're definitely not satisfied, yeah, and a lot more work is needed. So I think there's a view of how you do this, which is you can be the best there is, but you will only continue to do that if you drive forward innovation, you drive forward effort in this space. And it's hard. Monitoring is really hard. Yeah, you generate a lot of data. Yeah, and you need ways to sort of consume that data, and different people consume it in different ways. And a lot of data you collect, you don't realize how important it is until a lot later. So there's a lot of challenges around storage, but there's some great tools out there. So yeah, Grafana and Telegraph, sort of become very popular, in the last few years to instrument a wide range of activities and bring them into sort of central places. And then sort of the popularity of things like Jupyter notebooks for really drilling in and doing analytics on stuff. So we always have this sort of opportunity to sort of improve what we're doing. And I think this is part of our view that small continuous improvement adds up in the end. You don't need to like do massive programs to change the bank in a wholesale way. You need to like continually refine what you have, and there's lots of improvements that can be there. And then we use industry standard tools like Corville, and I think anybody who uses Corville will realize it's a very capable but challenging product to use. So we have to work with partners to figure out how to best make use of their tools. So there's sort of a feedback loop there. And then we have a lot of homegrown innovation. We have a lot of smart people who are helping to instrument our own environments. So we do metronoming. So we send out sort of pulse messages where we can sort of analyze where events occur in relation to others, very, very precisely. So I think there is a wide range of activities, and for TD, it's definitely like, as good as we are, we want to be better. So I think that's what I would take away from this.
Just if I may add, sorry, if I may add one more thing in, I would say that there's a huge focus as well, and Jason just triggered this for me, around as a service when it comes to analytics and what our clients are using. And I think gone are the days of purchasing massive appliances, keeping them around for a couple of years, and then having to spend all that CapEx up front again. That model is just really dead. And I think as we drive further into the analytics space and what we can do with this data and mining, clients are really expecting this to be a service-focused area, like they would for networks or anything for that matter, from the likes of BSO, as Judith has.
Yeah, and just to add that, there are a lot of innovation, a lot of tools out there, and so we're looking at things like IBM Watson. We collect masses and masses and masses of data and trying to get tools that help us get insight into that data, and sort of reveal things that maybe we could have found ourselves, but it might have taken a bit longer. So yeah, we're definitely looking to sort of bring those. I'm not a fan of like artificial, the terms artificial intelligence. I just think they're really good queries, but yeah, we're looking to bring those things in.
Smartness around your data. No, I get it. I completely understand. Okay, so let's have a look at the poll results. Okay, well, that's bullish. So we've got, how satisfied is your organization with your effectiveness of its trade infrastructure performance monitoring? Fairly satisfied, a little more work is needed. So that's like marking your own homework with a B, really, isn't it? And there are a fair few actually up the top. There aren't so many that are sort of down the bottom there. So if we can I just turn to Rob, just a quick one sentence synopsis of what you make to those results. Oh, hang on, people are fiddling with the results now.
Ooh.
They're still bullish though. So Rob, what do you make of that? Just very quickly.
A real-time poll. I mean, I think it's a testament to how we manage our networks and how clients manage theirs as well, from an infrastructure performance monitoring perspective. To hit on just what Jason said, it is incremental. It's continuing to grow. You really can't stand still when it comes to monitoring your infrastructure and performance.
Great. Okay, right. So we've got another 5 minutes or so, and I want to turn to a question that and get all of your views, starting with Nikhil. Are hosting services and data centers changing? How do you expect this space to evolve? And sticking with cloud, how is this driving change in hosting services and data centers specifically? And how do you expect this area to evolve? So if I can turn very quickly, maybe a sentence each, just so we get round everyone's view. Nikhil.
Ian, lot is changing in this, right? So far, if you think, there are three sets of data centers. We have the low latency data centers, we have corporate data centers, and we have cloud data centers. And pretty much most of the firms are using all three setups. Most of the data gets generated in the low latency data center as well as the corporate data center. And a lot of the data analytics are happening on the cloud. And I think that there will continue to be pressure to see like how we align this more, how we continue to make our applications more agile and the setup more agile. So we will continue to kind of move towards using cloud as much as possible, or at least using the cloud principles as much as possible.
Great, thank you. Jason, your view, get the other practitioners' view.
Yeah, I think Nikhil's last comment about, sort of cloud practices, a lot of cloud practices that are popularized by infrastructure as code in cloud are driving like improvements in the enterprise and low latency data centers. So I think that's really interesting. But I agree. I don't see any of those data centers going away anytime soon. I think we're going to have an expansion of analytics and data storage in cloud where it's not latency sensitive. The low latency data centers will be there until yeah, market structures change and latency isn't part of the equation.
Judith went, oh, go on then, Judith next.
Sorry, Judith.
Latency will always be part of the equation. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I lose my job. No, but so on our side, as I said, what I see is most of our customers are moving to the cloud. We still see some customers that are still reluctant. And the only thing I have to say is anyone that is reluctant on moving to the public cloud, BSO provides a private cloud. So give us a call.
Yeah.
And Steve.
Yeah, we've got two different types of monitoring that we do. So we use an agent-based, which is where we're deploying an agent or a probe onto a server or appliance. But more commonly now, we're getting more agentless based. So this is where we leveraging more of our cloud-based capabilities. So a lot of providers and clients are designing application now with RESTful APIs. So for both of those, we're finding that we can leverage both sides of it. So we're taking all that information and we do store that into the cloud. Like it's very important to have good monitoring. And if that's in your on-premise, in your data center, or if you're providing services from the cloud, but you really do need to be storing that. And that's something we've done for several years now. So we store all that information into powerful time series databases, and we store it indefinitely. So we can follow a server's lifespan if it's been there for years or been there for, a few hours or something like that. So, and we provide that back to the clients. And that's basically what everybody's been saying. I feel that, getting that data into the cloud, lowering those costs and getting those analytics so that you can start doing things like anomaly detection and, getting better information and hopefully having the system heal itself as well. So maybe you don't need to have those market data professionals doing that day-to-day job as much.
Making yourself redundant, never. Right, and Rob, very quickly, the last comment there.
Yeah, I would say that I wouldn't necessarily say that data centers are changing. I think everyone will appreciate that, a public cloud is a data center. It's just not your data center. What I would say is that hosting services are definitely evolving. And as we see clients more and more try to take advantage of where they put their data and applications, we drive further needs into how to route that data appropriately, where it should go, where should that compute reside, how to access it and when to access it. And I think those are kind of the big changes for us as a managed service provider, especially as we're focused on the financial cloud vertical.
Fantastic. Okay, so to wrap up, we've had crazy days, 10x capacity from Jason. We've had volumes are good from Nikhil. We've had a lot of lively debate and lively insight into the developments in the cloud and the monitoring spaces. So thank you all for your participation. It's been an excellent panel. Thank you very much. Virtual round of applause. You won't hear from that from the crowd. And I'd like to hand back to Slido and back to Andrew.
Thank you, Ian. Great job of moderating. We should really think about taking this up professionally. Really good job. Thanks to everyone, Judith, Robert, Steve, and I think that's Jason there. It could be an imposter, not sure, with the hair, who knows?
The younger version.
Good to see a younger version. That's it. That must be it. His old self. He's back to his old self again. Okay. Thanks all. Great session. Really nuts and bolts. We come from a low latency background in this space, so this stuff, love all this stuff. Always good to keep on top of the latest in terms of connectivity and the like. Next up, though, we're going to start to look. Really a revisit of perhaps the theme that Nathan brought up in his presentation earlier. We have a panel session, the title of which is Accelerating Digital Transformation and Migrating Legacy Apps to Create a Best-in-Class Trading Environment. This session is going to look at drilling down a bit into how to leverage low code for trading systems, DevOps, enabling smart desktops, microservices, and collaboration tools. And for this session, I'm handing over moderating duties to my colleague at A-Team, Sarah Underwood. Sarah, I can see you're there, so
I am.
I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. That's great. It's obviously been a very good conversation so far. And as Andrew said, our panel is about accelerating digital transformation and migrating legacy apps to create a best-in-class trading environment. And yes, I am Sarah Underwood, an A-Team Group editor, and I'll be moderating this session. Just a quick reminder that, as in other panel sessions, we'll be running a couple of polls, so please take an opportunity to answer those. And you can ask our speakers questions as we go along by using the Q&A box to the right of your video screen. Okay, we have a great panel ready and waiting to join the discussion. So let me ask the panelists to introduce themselves. And coming to you first, please, James, tell us a little bit about your expertise and why you're here today.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm James Worcester. I'm the COO of Glue 42. My background is almost exclusively software infrastructure for the integration of applications.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And over to you, Mark.
Thanks again, Sarah. So I'm Mark Maynard. I've been delivering technology now for a long time, about 30 years, predominantly in capital markets and banking. After 10 years or so of being a developer and doing development management, I moved to Barclays Capital in the early 2000s as a key technology player in the commodity startup there. And then from there, I moved on to focus on exotics, trading systems, and risk. And at JP Morgan, I was chief business technologist for commodity exotics, where my focus was on system migration. And I've been at DXC Luxoft now for the last 10 years or so in the banking and capital markets division. I'm based in London, but I'm lucky enough to have global coverage. And I develop services, run advisory, structure engagements, and of course do a lot of client work. So of course I've had responsibility for bespoke build and implementations for all sorts of trading systems, from front to back, from sales tools to market data, pricing, order management, execution, P&L risk, all the way through to back office functions. And now as a consultant, I currently have specific responsibility for what we call our technology enablement capability. And that's consulting services aimed at helping technology departments within the context of financial services to work better. So it may be a bit of a cliche, but we help our clients to go faster, better, and cheaper.
Thank you very much indeed. And coming to you, AJ.
Thank you, Sarah. It was, I'm really happy to be here. So I lead the engineering team for the financial desktop product within our wealth management business. We call that ConnectOS. This is something that enables our modernization within our organization. It includes our core framework, core applications, a developer toolkit, which enables us to accelerate our agile teams. I've been with JP Morgan for 15 years. I grew up within the organization. I've worked on a variety of different products. Prior to the Connect platform, I led structured products and syndicates, product engineering. And prior to that, I helped build our brokerage trading platform. So I'm really looking forward to discussing modernization and sharing my experiences.
Thank you very much. And Duncan, coming to you.
Save the best to last, eh? It's great to be here. Duncan Cooper. I look after Omni Digital Services for Bank of New York Mellon. Despite these youthful good looks, 25 years in the industry, mostly focused around technology and consulting roles, helping clients get the most out of their investments.
Okay, excellent. Thank you all very much indeed. And let's get on with the conversation. But first, let's run an audience poll. So this is your chance to say how you're feeling about some of the topics we'll be discussing today. And the question is, to what extent is your organization modernizing its trading systems, apps, and infrastructure? While you answer that question, let me come to Duncan to set the scene and talk about how capital markets firms are approaching technology modernization decisions and what trends he's seeing around buy or build.
Well, thanks, Sarah. I suppose the first kind of statement, which is a fairly obvious one, is every firm out there is loaded with technical debt. There are systems out there, you'll have cutting edge technology, you'll have some really cool stuff that you've just built or you've just implemented, going all the way back to stuff that may have been in your organization for over 20 years. And this technology is stuff that firms are starting to look at and focus upon and say, look, how can we change this? How can we upgrade it? How can we get the most out of it without disrupting business, without challenging the ecosystem that we currently have? And how can we bring it up to spec to be what we want it to be? When it comes to buying versus building, it's a difficult one. I think firms revert to buying more than they should build. And that seems like a strange statement to make, but the bravery to step forward and build your own solutions has been something that risk-averse banks, financial institutions have tried to avoid. There's uncertainty in that, whereas buying software, you maybe feel more certain about. I'm hoping that we're starting to see a change in that. I'm hoping that we're starting to see firms look at this as holistic solutions across the entire organization and being able to build technology quickly and cheaply based on common data standards. And I think it's that data standards bit that firms have been struggling with. It's been historically build something means building a silo, whereas now building means plugging new components onto more standardized data solutions. And I'm hoping that's where we start to see some real growth.
Thank you indeed, Duncan. Thank you. And Mark, coming to you, how do you see a technology modernization going? And are you saying more buy or build or buy?
So as Duncan said, I think in this trading space, there's still a mix of vendor and bespoke built trading systems. And I think that will really continue. And maybe just to change the orientation of the question slightly, I think really right now cloud adoption is the primary agenda. Our industry, I think, has finally got the elasticity, the options and the advantages of cloud. And what I see is the majority of banks now rushing to move to cloud. And consequently, a lot are really just looking at porting their existing stack to a cloud provider, which, it might necessitate some platform changes, but the move to the cloud is the focus. Now, with that shift, right, that's going to promote more modular, dynamic and layered platforms and really start to facilitate as a service models, a very fine level of granularity too. And just behind that fine level of granularity, I think we'll see a move to more agile and dynamic architectures that really focus on integration and fast change. And just to look at the layers for a little bit. Oh, is there a question? Just to look at the layers a little bit. For the platform services layer, I think the question really nowadays is more buy versus adopt. And by adopt, I mean using open source. And then for the business services layer, I think the question probably is, or at least will become, build versus buy versus rent. Rent being the as a service model. For business services where there is differentiation, I think bespoke build will always prevail. But it's interesting to note, I think, that what I'm seeing now is perhaps a little bit of a subtext in IT build, as in enterprise IT build versus user build. So for internal systems, I think IT will start to focus on building core trading platforms and services that then enable users to build their own low-code models and workflow. While externally facing systems, I think for the moment at least, will all be with enterprise IT. So to summarize, I'd say most banks, trading houses, IT at the moment, it's rent for cloud elasticity and costs. It's adopt for architecture and platform change, and that will enable dynamic environments. And I guess moves becoming more data driven. And that adopt stack will probably be wrapped in some kind of support model. Then buy for non-differentiating commodity business services, perhaps moving to rent, and then build for differentiation of the clutch time point, at the client touch points. So these areas will see investment in experience research and bespoke development.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. Let's see how our audience is getting on with modernizing trading systems. And yes, they're doing obviously a very good job there. Top of the pile, 50%, 7% to a significant extent is the extent to which their organization is modernizing trading systems. Mark, coming back to you briefly, what would you say about that poll result?
Well, I'm glad to see that, and that's exactly what I was expecting. I think a few things will be driving this, and bear with me. The first is internet democratization and the cloud, as I said earlier. And I think the pace of IC change is astounding to everyone, and democratization is probably the key driver. Internet technology obviously opened up the markets, first on the desktop and now on mobile devices. But cloud technology is probably the next shift, and that's going to open up a whole new ecosystem of platform services and allow banks to operate on a leaner estate. And of course, it's going to lead to further disruption. And with the cloud, I think elastic computing has unleashed even more possibilities in data processing, in integrated management reporting, scenario modeling, custom insights and the like. And I think a lot of people are scrabbling to take advantage of that. Going back to what Duncan said in the opening comments as well, I think for the last 20 years or so, it's been far too easy for organizations to be application centric, rather than focus on business and user requirements. And to make this worse, I think recently budgets have focused on mandatory requirements. And, as Duncan said, these things have led to gaps and poor user experiences. And finally, I think with cultural change, we have tech savvy generations now, Generation Y and Z. They're onboarding into banks, now moving into leadership positions. And this means generations of business users with the ideas and ability to innovate outside of IT. And this is also culturally shifting, I think, what it means to be enterprise IT and how it operates. And that in itself requires changes in investment. So to summarize, I think it's a great time to be in IT. And I would have been worried for my outlook in consulting and DXC if the answer was not at all.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Thanks for that one. And let's run a second audience poll, our second and last for this session. And this time it asks, what types of new technologies is your organization planning to use? So moving forward from all that modernization, what exactly are you using to achieve it? So you can tick as many boxes as are appropriate to your organization. And as you do that, let me bring in James to tell us a little about the technologies being used for modernization and why modernization really requires a change in mindset.
Thanks, Sarah. So I guess modernization in many senses has a connotation of ripping stuff out and replacing stuff. Certainly that used to be the way IT organizations work, less so these days. And I think part of the solution there is an awareness around integration of applications and desktop integration in particular. And I obviously see an IT landscape through the perspective of desktop integration platforms. I'd like to make 2 points. First of all, you've got to question why you're trying to modernize your environment. If it's an initiative based upon dealing with legacy systems, as Duncan mentioned earlier, then an integration platform can help you decompose those large and often monolithic applications into sort of reusable, finer grained components. And if by having that level of decomposition, you can then subsequently discover these components at runtime and roll them together in new and interesting ways, then I think you start questioning whether it's legacy anymore. The application is fundamentally the same, the functionality might be the same, but the ways in which you use it are different. And so again, with a desktop integration approach, if you place those components in an enterprise app store, then you can allow the users or senior business leaders perhaps to start to reconfigure what the desktop looks like. And Mark, you mentioned the need to move away from application centric. Totally agree. The only people who care about applications are the vendors who make them, or indeed the developer teams who build them. Users don't care less about an application. They care about the collection of tools that they're provided in order to do their job. And so that takes me on to the second and final point, which is that if your modernization initiative is about upgrading and optimizing business workflows, then again, taking either new modern SaaS-based applications and legacy components and combining them together with a workspace approach, in other words, multiple applications, sharing the user interface, without fighting each other, and also synchronizing on data objects, then you can achieve modernization in that sense too. And that allows you to move away from the concept of an application to a working environment that supports a particular process. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, but you can integrate it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And AJ, what would you add there in terms of techs and tools and a sort of rethinking in how you do things?
Yeah, sure. So the goal really is to enable our business to be nimble, agile, and continuously innovate. So modernization technologies that enable us to deliver solutions rapidly without disruption. That's kind of the key of what we think about when we think about like technologies that we need for modernization. So, also think about like every technology stack is legacy shortly after it's deployed. So the mindset change is not thinking, is this technology modern today? Instead thinking, can my architecture evolve? Can it continually upgrade it with confidence? So for us, like the key to enable this is decoupling components into microservices, into micro front ends, away from monolithic legacy systems. So this decoupling also requires, like, once you decouple things, you need solutions to bring things back together so that your users aren't impacted by some sort of fragmented experience. And we can do this not just for the users, but also thinking about like how our IT operators, how they have a unified view of this entire distributed system that's been decoupled. So things like resilient microservices deployed in scalable clouds, desktop integration technologies, which enable us to decouple the front end while still providing a unified and intuitive experience for the end user. Advanced monitoring, which was discussed a lot in the previous session. We're going to decouple things. We're going to make things more complex. We want to be able to have proactive alerts. We want to know when things are happening across our entire environment. And we want to build in intelligence into everything, all our products, including our monitoring, using data, using machine learning. For the end user, we want to enable personalization. So like, every user is unique in their experience and the things that they use. So enable as much personalization as possible. So those are like some of the keys that we're looking at. There's also another trend in general, looking to eliminate or reduce toil in both business and IT operations through automation. So in business automation, like in terms of what's happening ops, robotic process and automation. So you may have some disparate systems which can't be easily integrated. So you can use that to bridge that gap. And in IT operations, a lot of what's happening in the SRE practices, allowing us to get to the next level of reliability for critical systems, including trading.
Excellent, thank you. And let's see what our audience is thinking in terms of techs and tools. Okay, AI and ML are right up there. Microservices follow. Let me come to you, James. Would you like to make a quick comment on those results, please?
I guess I'm pleasantly surprised that AI and ML is so far ahead. I think that's quite interesting. I mean, from an integration perspective, AI and ML have a role to play there, because with a complex desktop environment, if you're relatively new to it, then those kind of technologies can help nudge the user, coerce the user to follow a particular process or business flow. Next best activity, next best action is the kind of thing that fits there. I'm pleased that microservices is so high, and to AJ's point, having microservices is a great thing. You just need a tool to integrate those together and orchestrate them. RPA, I think if this if this webinar took place 3 years ago, RPA would be at the top. I'm glad to see it at the bottom, not because I don't like it. It has a critical role to play in virtually all enterprises. It's just that the low-hanging fruit that's suitable for RPA has all been nibbled away. And I think you need tools that are better able to deal with lightly governed applications and constant change within the enterprise. So yeah, very interesting results.
Thanks very much indeed. And if I may, Mark, let me come back to you to tell us a little bit about the benefits of adopting open source technologies.
Let's make sure I come off mute.
Yep.
So I guess, what does open source software actually mean? Right. So for the purposes of this question, let's go with the definition that open source specifically conveys the right to not only see the code, but also the right to fork and modify it. And that code may have originated from an individual, academia, or a corporation. But let's extend the definition slightly to assume that the right to modify the code has been actively adopted by the community and an effective community governance model is in force. So maybe we should call it community software. And we'd expect to see worldwide commits on GitHub every day. Now, I think that point is important because without the community behind open source, you lose the scale. Historically, right, there were security and longevity concerns over using open source. But as long as the system has scale, right, I think these become irrelevant. And in fact, community developed software, I would argue, is safer than any alternative. And that's the first advantage. Again, scale is the key point. So I think about the open source world perhaps in 3 parts. Part 1 would be bespoke development. That's design time activity, code, libraries, and design time tools. And the second part is platform services. And the third, business services. So on the first part, I think the question is a moot point because every developer in every organization will be doing this through the likes of Maven or similar. They'll be using frameworks like Angular, React, etc., tools like Jenkins. This has all become mainstream. On the second layer, on platform services, and here I mean things like data stores, event systems, and messaging and the like, engines like Ignite, Hadoop, Spark, Kafka, etc. And I think it's fair to say that historically banks resisted using open source in this space. And it's hard to pinpoint when, but I think attitudes changed from around the late 2000s. And the catalyst was probably corporations like Google publishing their systems as open source and widespread adoption. And because the uptake is so prolific and the communities around these open source platforms so enormous, they just can't be ignored. And I think that's for many reasons, and so I'll come into the advantages. The first, and I think most important, is open source is not dependent on country, company, or author. So there's no country, company, or key man risk. Secondly, open source is generally faster and elastic. It's easy to install, so there's no negotiation, there's no lead time to access and trial the system. And for this reason, I think they're often the de facto standard in cloud services. That and the community simply means the talent pool for supporting and building on these platforms is simply bigger, probably by orders of magnitude. The platform itself will evolve, so both functionally and with more integration options. And it will get bug fixes, I think, at a rate that can't be matched privately. Okay. Fads will come and go, right, particularly in technology. So I think we all know that software should be insulated through interfaces to limit lock-in, including open source. But I think with open source, there are more likely to be open standards in place or evolving, which will support portability. And I think probably most of the time we would adopt open source because it is the standard and it happens to be open source, not because it is open source. Okay. And finally, I just think the number of options and projects available. I mean, inevitably, there will be complementary ecosystems too, which means that any extension you might need will likely already exist. Arguably, though, perhaps a downside is that the industry may benefit from some consolidation. Consolidation would result in less confusion, a small number of projects, and perhaps larger communities.
Okay.
I've got more actually.
I think we probably need to move on at this point, Mark. I think open source is a very important thing. Can we? Shall we move on from there? Is that all right with you?
I think. Can I just do the last point, right? Because
yeah, sure.
I talked about design time tools and platform, and I think actually the business platform is the most interesting, right? Particularly in our arena. And my first question around that really is the question whether or not, you know, financial services as an ecosystem has the scale to support community-backed software. Now we see the likes of things like Finos and pockets like Quick Fix, but is the scale really there? And I think, and this is an important point, right, that the only way that the open source is going to be successful in trading is that if a bank or a vendor publishes its code, publishes its platform. We do see, I guess, banks publishing POCs and parts of their system or ancillary functions, but I don't think anything like that has been meaningful so far. And I think eventually it will happen when one bank realizes or one vendor realizes that by being first, they will gain the advantage. So that's a space to watch, I think, Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And changing the subject slightly away from open source and coming back to you, Duncan. We touched a little bit on what to do with all those legacy systems and how you integrate new technologies and applications into workflows. What would your advice be here?
Well, lots of legacy systems means lots of legacy integration. And that kind of reverts to the lowest common denominator. So there's going to be a lot of FTP and there's going to be a lot of CSV files. And, you know, I personally am opposed to any technology that's actually older than I am. I always think we should be aiming a little bit more modern than that. So if you imagine everybody's got them, the architecture diagram they've got in their room, you know, the logical boxes of systems in your organization. For me, it's about concentrating on the white space around the boxes. It's not the boxes themselves. How do you get information from one box to another? How do you link them together? And then looking at how you can kind of isolate some of these boxes and change them without impacting the rest of the world. So there's this concept of a strangler pattern based around the strangler fig. Wrap up the technology and isolate it and abstract it from everything, and then start to unpick it and unplumb it and eventually kill off the original technology and replace it with something hopefully younger than me, which, you know, doesn't cut down the technology landscape too much, I can assure you. I think the key for me, though, in that sense, is understanding those data flows in your enterprise, understanding how this organization is moving data around it, and then you are in a better position to be able to abstract and isolate your systems. The other thing I'd always say is change is a constant, not a project. If you start thinking in terms of, oh, we'll do this piece of work and it will fix things, it never happens like that. You know, this is an evolution, it's an ecosystem, and like all ecosystems, you know, some are going to evolve and become stronger and some are going to die and become extinct, and that's okay. But it's about managing that story and managing that overarching enterprise view, as opposed to worrying about single projects and single systems for me.
Okay, AJ, what would you add there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Definitely resonates the strangler pattern and kind of you know, compartmentalizing all the different parts of your architecture and picking it off piece by piece. One thing, kind of an approach, is like, don't attempt big bangs, whether it's like on a macro level or a micro level. So you want to pilot new capabilities and also get real feedback with real data in production. So it's amazing how the reality is that when a user is actually using something in production with real consequences, how their feedback changes, and you want to kind of like incrementally move things in, get some feedback in real production, and it's worth taking the extra effort to making sure that things are backwards compatible, that you have feature flags where you can turn things on and off for different user groups. You can roll out to certain user groups, may have the new functionality may be perfect for them. They don't need the legacy. Other user groups may need more time before they're ready for the legacy. Another thing is like when you're rebuilding your technology, that's an opportunity now to rethink your business process. So it's really tempting just to replicate your same application and then just use a different technology. But what you're going to find is that many things that were built in over the years in your legacy application are no longer needed. Another interesting thing that happens is that once you start to enable some of these new technologies that are decoupled and that enable rapid development, it empowers your developers and your product teams. So this is a great benefit for the whole organization. But an interesting side effect is that people can build things really fast now. So it requires like extra governance and structure to ensure that things are aligned and you have consistency. And one thing that's, important for us is capturing as much data as possible in our environment, whether it be user metrics or any other metrics that we can use to inform our decisions about what to prioritize, what are people actually using, and where should we put our focus.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Duncan, I have an audience question that has been put in specifically, and I think this would be a good time to ask it. It says, you mentioned technical debt as part of legacy systems. What about design debt, where systems have been modified in a reactive manner to meet user needs, thus causing bottlenecks, functional duplication, and so on? So design debt.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I've dealt with organizations who have invested in new technology and spent a huge amount of money making that new technology work exactly like the old technology they were replacing. And it's the age-old problem. If you look at what you're trying to achieve from just a technology perspective, or just from a business perspective, or even just from a data perspective, you're missing out on those other views. And everything, when you design a new process, a new feature, a new piece of functionality, you've got to include those three viewpoints. Technology's good, data's good, business operations is good, but how do you glue those three together to solve a future problem? So I completely agree, business process debt or business operating model debt is a big problem. And, you shouldn't just look at that in isolation to technology.
Okay, while we're taking a little break, AJ, I ask you another audience question? It asks, we've done a lot of work on this. Where does the panel see the end game, at least in the short term? Obviously, there is no end game, but in the short term, and as a practitioner, where do you really want to be here?
Yeah, I think you want to be in a place where you feel like you can release new features, new products, and not be scared that anything bad's going to happen in your environment. So, you want to get to a point where you can continually do upgrades. Like if the cybersecurity thing comes out and you need to like change all your libraries, you want the confidence that when you make that change, you have all the tests in place, you have the deployment pipeline in place, you can release that in production, and you can not have a single kind of like sleepless night, like waiting for the Monday morning to arrive and something to go haywire. So like you really want to get to that place where you feel really confident and just continually deploying. There's this book called Accelerate. This came out a few years. It's kind of like it does a lot of research in terms of the DevOps space, and it has like some key metrics. And I think like looking towards some of the key metrics they describe, like deployment frequency, failure rate, and I think there's a few more. But regardless, looking at those key metrics and trying to ensure that you're like kind of moving towards that direction and improving those. And it's really about your confidence level and you're being able to change your code.
Excellent, thank you. And what we'll be answering to the same question next year, but that's a year away. So let me come back to you, AJ, and can you just sort of explore in a little bit more detail and tell us about an implementation story that's been a success?
Yes, sir. So last year we decommissioned, and when I mean decommissioned, we actually turned off the servers of our legacy monolith, which serviced our private bank line of business. So this monolith took over 20 years to build, and it had functionality across all the different roles in our organization. We replaced this with our new Connect platform, which is basically composed over 400 decoupled micro applications built by small agile teams across the globe. So initially we started this with new value add capabilities like killer apps that drove people to use it, and things that our business never had before. But once the platform and these capabilities started to take off, we needed to incorporate all the legacy capabilities that were built up over the decades. So in many cases, we were able to rethink a lot of the important parts of our environment and rebuild them using a new modern stack. In other cases, we had to bridge legacy applications into that experience. So I think some of the key elements, like from our story, is decomposition and recomposition. So, you have to initially decompose all the pieces of your user workflow into their own components. And then that's something that's really great from a technical standpoint. It allows you to do things and move really rapidly. But getting the user experience right from all these decoupled components was really a tricky part. So we simplified this by creating a contextual workspaces, which brought together all the pieces of these workflows into a simple and intuitive user experience. So after this, things started to click, and we were able to start removing access to a large number of our users. Another thing that I mentioned was application replatforming and bridges. So, in some cases, our legacy systems and components were perfectly fine the way they were. For these, we just needed to move them to the new environment and modernize them. So we came up with some recipes and a cookbook on how to move certain technologies into cloud environments. So you kind of wrap some legacy code. You don't need to change it, wrap it into something that's deployable into a cloud environment. And then initially, all you may have to do is just recolor or restyle the UI. You may have some legacy sources. Later, you can replace, like we have a component library design system. So later you can start replacing the UI with newer components and move your legacy databases to strategic services, etc. I think another key element was thinking about the user and converting the user, not thinking about the technology. So initially, when we first started off, we were actually able to convert about 80% of our users within 2 years or 2.5 years. So we had the majority of our users converted. The hard part was converting the last 2 users, which took another about 2 years to do, the last 20%. So there's this long tail of use cases and deep kind of things that have been built up over the years. But the interesting thing is that if you focus on the user, you can say like, well, maybe I can convert a large amount of my users to the new platform. I can still keep the old one running. I can reduce the number of servers, the amount of infrastructure. And, for the majority of the organization, they're on the new platform. The legacy one is still there, but you kind of chip away over it and over time to completely eliminate it. So that's kind of our story. And, at this point, we're actually doing this for other legacy monoliths across the organization in different lines of businesses. So currently we're spanning across 4 lines of businesses within the private bank and wealth management. And there are 400 core roles or user roles that we're targeting. There are about 23,000 active users, and there are about 1,000 developers contributing to applications and pieces of this ecosystem.
Impressive. Thanks very much indeed, AJ. Obviously, an ongoing project. James, can I come to you to talk through briefly a story that you've seen a successful modernization?
Well, AJ has just stolen my thunder because that was a Glue 42 implementation. Thanks, AJ. And Bank of New York Mellon will also be using Glue 42 for a similar sort of strategic level project. So what I would like to do, tap dancing here, is give you a slightly different perspective, which will impact both JP Morgan, Bank of New York Mellon, and lots of other financial institutions. And that is that when you integrate your own applications, you at least have some control over how they're built, how they're released, etc. And you can modify those applications to achieve, integration. What's interesting though, and this is a trend that's growing extremely fast at the moment, is if you look inside a major financial institution, they've got lots of pre-packaged applications, trading systems, research systems, order management systems, etc. Now, if you look at the vendors that provide those applications, they have a similar modernization problem. Their applications aren't all shiny and new. They've acquired businesses over time, and they have the very same integration problem that a bank or a hedge fund would have. What's really compelling at the moment is how ISVs, independent software vendors, are taking open source integration platforms and building that into their own offerings, and then using one of the standards that Mark mentioned, FinOS FTC3, to expose that to the outside world. The net of all of that, with the right integration platform, of course, is that you can accelerate even further through a bank's modernization program, because if the vendors of prepackaged applications have bought into the dream of let's integrate anything and quickly, and the internal applications are also being modernized at the same time, then you get this sort of network effect where you can bring any application, old or new, in-house or third party, together very quickly. And I think you will see more and more software vendors embracing this kind of integration and building these services into their own offerings. It's not something I saw 2 years ago, but it's something that's occurring pretty much every other week at the moment.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And I have a question from our audience for you, James, as well. A quick answer, if you could, please, because we are coming close to time. Can you give examples of any quick wins that will demonstrate to the business the benefits of interoperability to help us get funding? I think you heard that middle word. It was interoperability. Sorry.
Yes. What's a quick answer? A quick answer would be identify your most commonly used applications where the lack of integration causes either most confusion or consumes too much time, and therefore the process is suboptimal. And then look for one of these things that's emerging in the integration space, this concept of an appliance. Rather than being a very complex integration project, an appliance integrates app A with app B for a particular set of processes. So go look for an appliance, deploy that within a couple of days, and then you've probably cracked the largest part of your integration problem without employing hundreds of developers.
Okay, excellent. We are coming close to time, so I'm going to move on to our final question, and I'm going to ask everybody to tell us what they think things are going to look like over the next 12 months, and tell us also what might happen for vendors and financial institutions that don't get on board with all these new approaches and technologies. So coming back to you, James, please kick off. Just a few words, please.
Continued adoption of open source, particularly for integration platforms. And as I said a few minutes ago, this concept of integration appliances, I think from my perspective, that's where it's going.
Okay, that's great. AJ, a few words from you, and what happens if you don't do it?
Sure. Yeah, there's so many things, but for us, the focus will be on personalization. So thinking about every user as being unique, we want to make sure that their experience is relevant for them. So that's kind of the key thing in using data to achieve that. Technology is a continual disruptor. So, if financial institutions don't get on board and don't kind of adopt new technology and kind of make it part of their DNA, automating and enhancing all the areas of the business, then the institutions will fall behind, and eventually they're going to lose their competitive advantage and disappear. So I think it's really like core to survival of organizations and firms.
Thank you very much indeed. And Duncan, how are things evolving?
For me, I think it's that there is a vitality to change now. Smart firms will be changing now. The longer you delay this, the longer you wait, the exponential increase in costs, and the harder it's going to be for you to change.
Excellent. And final few words from you, please, Mark.
So back to cloud for me, I'd say that today all new development is cloud native, cloud first. And it may be a bold thing to say, but I suspect by the end of 2022, the only things that we see left on premises will be run to kill applications. And with that move to cloud, we'll start to see a whole new ecosystem of as a service offerings. And I guess if people don't do that, right, then they perhaps risk becoming irrelevant and risk becoming uncompetitive.
Okay, the good thing is get out there and do it. The bad thing is if you don't, you could have a problem. So thank you all very, very much indeed for sharing your expertise, your views on different techs, how to approach them, how to integrate, how to look forward. It's been a great session. Thanks all for taking part. And let me hand back to Andrew.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks to the panel. Fabulous session. Great panel to end with today. Really had a forward-looking view to it. So thanks to all those panelists, to James, Duncan, AJ, and Mark. Special kudos to James for the tap dancing, which is what really people pay to see these days. As I say, we've reached the end of today's session. For me, it's been a really great conference. Really have enjoyed all the themes. I have to say a big thank you to all of our speakers and to, of course, to all of our sponsors. Platinum sponsor is DXC Lugsoft. We have Glue42, Options Technology, BSO, CJC, and IPC. And thanks to our media partners, Financial IT and FinTech Finance. A few little items before you go. Please do complete the delegate feedback form. Your feedback is important to us for the future development of our events. Please note that if you've missed any sessions from today, they will be available on demand for a limited time. So if you'd like to share some of today's sessions with your teams, you should do so sooner rather than later. I guess they can sign in through the platform to do that. We will be continuing many of these conversations at our next TradingTech Summit, which is currently scheduled for London in February 2022, mere months away. So if you'd like to get involved in that, let us know. At the moment, it's a physical event. Let's see. But I've so much enjoyed today, so I don't feel it matters too much. If you want to sign up for that now, you can do so apparently through the TradingTech Insight events page. We also will be running a bunch of webinars around some of the themes that you've heard discussed today. All of our future in-person events, by the way, will have a live streamed offering. So if you can't attend in person, then you can at least watch virtually. Before I sign off, I would like to thank the team at A-Team, in particular conference producer Lorna Van Ziel, who put together I think a very compelling and really forward-looking program for us today. That's been fantastic. And thanks to Jerry Ann McEwen, who runs the desk and makes it all happen on the day pretty seamlessly, I think. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate that. Finally, thanks to you all in the audience for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again soon. So here's to next time. Thank you all and goodbye.